OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
It is 7:30 a.m. here this morning on OTB AM. It's Gerard Gilroy and Owen Sheehan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning, and we have a very busy programme for you. We'll be looking back at our own exploits on Friday in the duathlon. We're going to talk about the return of GAA with Michael Quinlivan, who was in action for Clonmel in Tip. We'll get his take on what the actual experience, the whole thing was like as an actual player on the field of play. Kenny Cunningham's going to look back at a fairly interesting weekend on and off the field in football, particularly the FA Cup semi-finals and the sacking at Watford and what that means for the rest of the season. We'll do the sports pages. We'll do our patented Gillette pressure rankings around about 9 o'clock this morning for you as well. Shane Hannon's going to give us the sports news. If you want to get in touch this morning, you can WhatsApp us. 087 180 180 is the number, or you can use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter and we'll get your comments. Of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment there and try and be nice about it if you can. Yesterday, the Sunday paper review, it was Paul Rouse, the UCD historian and author, and our own Dave McIntyre alongside Joe Malloy, talking about the various stories on the back pages of the Sunday papers. Going to start here with the conversation about how the GAA responded and the different views around the country about where we are at the moment and what chances we might have of actually having an inter-county football season or an inter-county hurling season for that matter. Have a listen.
Paul Rouse, let's jump off with the tensions rise in GAA with calls to abandon season. Shane McGrath here in the back page of the Mail on Sunday. He has that quote from the Leitrim chairman, Enda Stenson. He wants to pull out of the championship altogether, wants others to follow. It doesn't seem with phase 4 of the reopening happening that we're going to have 500 people attending games. At the moment it's stuck on 200. There are various pieces on the GAA and the next 2-3 months across the papers, from Shane McGrath within the Mail on Sunday to Colin O'Rourke to Eamon Sweeney, various other pieces. Where do you want to start?
I think with a general point first, and that is that you can't read the COVID stories in the sports pages without also reading the COVID stories in the news pages, and the news reporting of an uptick in the number of new cases, of the nature of those cases, and of, as the headline in the Sunday Independent, the country on a knife edge, the sense that while COVID hasn't roared back, that it hasn't gone away, and that it would not take a massive amount for it to push around the country again. So it is within that context that people all across the country who are involved in the GAA are obviously delighted to be back training, delighted to be back playing, delighted to have the prospect of going to matches, even at capacities of 200. Delighted to have games to talk about rather than the absence of games to talk about. But the word precarious is used here in a couple of reports. It's used by Shane, and then you can see it in other news reports. This idea of it being a precarious situation. And this is clearly colouring how people are approaching this. And if you look at the GAA has repeatedly presented itself as a community-based organisation. It does not run itself in the professional context, as we know, of the major leagues of European sport and of British sport and American sport, who create essential bubbles to protect sports people who go about playing their games. The GAA cannot do that. It has repeatedly stressed its community nature. Now, this is where that strength is also leaves the GAA in a really vulnerable position, because if it gets in to clubs, it's spread across the community. That's the very nature of the organisation. And it is in that context, again, that you must read these pieces. And there's a line in the middle of Shane McGrath's piece on page 68 on the Mail, it's inside in the Mail, where he talks about the variety of views that are being expressed by people. And I think this is an equally pastoral commentary across the newspapers, in which he says the amateur epidemiologists have reappeared over the past 72 hours, arguing against the regulations and insisting that crowds of up to 500 should be let attend GAA matches. It's as if this idea that the GAA should get preferential treatment. And that's really hard to square with the medical advice and with the sense of a really serious disease that is lurking in the background.
Yeah. Dave, on Shane McGrath's piece, he's talking about the the GAA pushing their limits and get it badly wrong. That's the headline, and talked about the goodwill built up in lockdown. It can't be traded for favourable treatment now, and there was maybe a hope. John Horan was on Morning Ireland on Friday of getting 500 to attend GAA matches. And Shane McGrath writes, just because the GAA have conducted themselves well so far is not a reason to give them leeway now. That is not how a coordinated response to the threat posed by a pandemic works, a point that one suspects a great many GAA people understand. So that's Shane's take on the situation. Colm O'Rourke is writing in the Sunday Independent, Dave, and he admits he was one of those who was really pushing for the GAA to accelerate reopening. And now it would seem that he's not best pleased with what he's seen. He writes, at the heart of my conviction that we should have been moving sooner was the feeling that both young and old, but mainly young, would exercise personal responsibility. That, in the modern world, is taking a leap of faith. There are too many who believe personal responsibility is for others. The concept itself forms the very basis of society. Without it, you just have selfishness and individualism. And he's talking about the lack of personal responsibility that he has seen. It strikes me many of our youths, and maybe even more than that, are acting completely irresponsibly with social gatherings, house parties, and whatever you're having yourself. Social distancing broke down a long time ago with teenagers in particular, but if they stay local, it's not such a huge issue. He goes on later to say, anyway, what is happening now is that reckless behaviour by some is endangering all. And, you know, GAA players, can they not give up a house party, or can they not give up a holiday a year? The disease may not cause young people too many problems, but they are spreading the virus to a much more vulnerable cohort. This didn't come as a surprise to me. You know, weeks ago when we were talking about why we needed to exercise caution and why the GAA couldn't just suddenly open the floodgates, it is for that very reason, human nature.
Yeah, it is. I think the piece that Shane wrote in the Irish Mail on Sunday is probably looking at the first, what I believe to be the first misstep in the GAA's approach to the pandemic and the manner in which they've taken an uber cautious approach. And I felt that they have really led by example almost from day one. And for weeks, we've been reading Colm's opposition to the risk-averse nature of the approach that GAA have taken. So I had to read his piece 2 or 3 times today just to really take it in. It's a significant U-turn. And in fairness to me, he does firmly say that he's admitting that he's very much changing his view on things. He said the GAA are being too careful. And now, as he, in his own words, he says he's switched from being a hawk to a dove because he's so alarmed by what he's seen over the last couple of weeks. But my question is, what did he expect? He's an incredibly worldly wise, experienced man. He's a school principal, so he knows more about dealing with teenagers than the vast majority of people. And he seems to be shocked almost by the general failure to accept collective responsibility. His naivety, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it strikes me. Anyone who's observed the behaviour of a large cohort of young people, yes, from day one, but not just young people, people from all sections of society, they would have known that this was going to be a major issue for the GAA when it came to returning the organisation to something resembling normality. So I don't think anyone should be surprised at the fact that we've seen clubs in Derry and Cork and Dublin having to shut down all of their activities because of a small outbreak of COVID-19. And there's a couple of bizarre theories put forward by Colm. He says maybe that a player who's caused his club team to miss out on playing in their county championship won't have many friends. That players who go on holiday or to parties where there are a whole lot of strangers, well, they'd better stay away from the club. It's not a very well thought out way of looking at it. Again, blaming young people at a time when the government have not banned travel, at a time when the government have allowed a certain number of people to congregate indoors, at a time when they're encouraging people to get back to playing sport. It's a piece that's full of contradictions. And I think those contradictions illustrate the difficulty that the GAA have and are really going to experience in the next month in trying to get players back out on the field.
Eamon Sweeney on the back page of the Sunday Independent. Irish life is not entirely governed by a desire to absolutely maximise our survival chances. So he kind of captures the dilemma for everybody, really. He talks about the argument that he's seen. I've seen it argued the risk of virus transmission through resumed GAA activity is sufficiently high to make postponing the season altogether the safest option. If there's the possibility of even one death due to a GAA match, it's suggested we should call everything off and wait until 2021. This argument is, to a certain extent, he says, unassailable. Who would argue that any amount of matches in any sport are worth a human life? But he goes on to say, it is worth noting We don't normally judge risk in this way. The state could, for example, unquestionably save dozens of lives every year by restricting road travel to essential journeys and making it illegal to drive at night. It could save even more by entirely prohibiting the sale of alcohol in Ireland and doing the same with tobacco. So why doesn't it? Hundreds of lives would be saved after all. They get by without these things. They'd be healthier, they'd live longer. We're talking about human lives. But he goes on to say, the state believes in a trade-off between risk and freedom. Irish life is not entirely governed by the desire to absolutely maximise our survival, and makes the point that we're all aware of, which is this situation could extend into 21, 22 and beyond. It's a devil of a situation to be in, is what he says. Paul, I know you like that piece.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent piece, and I think what he does really well without over egging it is that he balances the mental health aspect beside the physical health aspect, and I think he's very sympathetic towards the dilemma faced by government and faced by people within sporting organisations who wish to organise games, and striking a balance between these remains the enormous challenge that is going to continue over the next while, but it is added to because you cannot look at the GAA or any other sporting organisation even merely in sporting terms. It is that other dilemma about livelihoods. There are people who depend, there are people who are employed by the GAA, there are people who's all across the country who are working as coaches at various different levels who must be paid. So the GAA it's desperate to get its sports back on for sport's sake, for the people in local clubs, but it also needs to earn money to drive the organisation. That's the nature of the sporting organisation that has been created, particularly over the last 20 years.
Yeah. It's a continuing problem we have, and we're just constantly in the throes of what the news on the front pages is when it comes to figuring out how to map out the sporting landscape. So that's where we are. A temperature check on the GAA world on July 19th. A sense of confusion. People aren't sure the best way to proceed. But the front page does have championship matches happening, so we are up and running to an extent. At page 2 of the Sunday Independent then, Paul Kimmage is writing about painkillers in sport. Dave, you commentate on football all the time, and it's about painkillers in football. Jonathan Sash is, and I may be mispronouncing his name, but he has worked on a documentary which went out on German television 5 weeks ago. He was born in 1987, Jonathan. Initially, he was involved in cycling journalism. He's from Berlin, and he has spent the last couple of years trying to get a grip on the use of painkillers in football. His piece went out in the last 5 weeks. It seems that it's prompted a big discussion in Germany. The Bundesliga have met. German anti-doping agency have met as well in a 2-hour meeting in Frankfurt on the back of the investigation. Corrective is what he has set up. It's Germany's first non-profit news organisation. He set that up in 2014. They've written about various things, and they've moved sporting and otherwise. So he says at one point, this is a piece written on the site, why do so few players fail doping tests? Because testing in soccer isn't intelligent, only the dumb ones fail. In the Bundesliga, there are no blood tests, so blood doping can't be proven. Players in Germany are tested on average just every 3rd year, which is amazing, actually. I can't believe it's that rare. And Hajo Seppelt, who people will know, the world's foremost drug sport investigator, has worked on this piece as well. In 2018, at the World Cup, 1 in 4 players in Russia took painkillers before every match. So 2018 World Cup, 25% of players take painkillers before every match. One particular player used 3 different painkillers. And then at under-17s, under-20 World Cups in 05 and 07, almost half of the players took painkillers while competing at the tournament. There is a quote from one of the few players to go on the record, Neven Subotic, 31 years of age, Serbian, plays for Mainz, played for Dortmund as well under Klopp. He says, from what I've noticed over the past 14 years, ibuprofen is handed out like Smarties. It's used across the board. And I've met players who, week after week, need additional painkillers immediately before a game. He says the whole system is missing an official to make sure that everything is done properly. There's a quote from another player there, a former player, who says that it was just a habit that he would take a painkiller before every game, and that seems pretty commonplace. Dave, I wouldn't suspect many people will be shocked to hear that.
No, I don't think so at all. There's a quote from the former Arsenal Germany goalkeeper Jens Lehmann from his time in North London, where he talked about teammates of his just taking injections without asking questions, and with how he puts it, blind faith in the physicians. And Lehman does believe that there were no illegal substances given, but he can't be 100% sure about that. The piece starts with a quote from Jordan Henderson, who picked up a bang on the knee in the first half of Liverpool's second leg Champions League semi-final win over Barcelona last season. And he was pretty much telling the medical staff at halftime in the change room to do whatever it took to get him back onto the field. And he took there was an injection. He took painkillers as well. And he's the team captain. He was desperate to be on the field to try and help them see through that game, which, as we know, they ultimately did. But there isn't an awful lot of new stuff here. Paul has obviously been writing in detail for quite some time on the medicalization of sport, and it's mainly been focused on rugby to this point. And we've heard many current and ex-pros talk about their experiences in a rugby changing room and describe, I remember Donegal Callaghan on Off the Ball, for example, talking in these terms about a bag just being handed around a dressing room, and how surprised he was at the willingness of some of the younger players just to almost routinely, out of habit, dip into the bag and pop a few pills, because they all were carrying a knock of some description and they all needed it, or at least believed in their minds they needed it to get through the game. So we would have been naive and foolish to think that this wasn't equally as relevant to football, where I'm sure very few players begin a game 100% fit. Maybe the very first game of the season, but within 2 or 3 weeks, they're probably carrying some sort of a niggle, and you do whatever you can to stay on the field. So I'm not surprised by this. There's not an awful lot new in it. I'm not sure where you go from it. As long as there are no rules being broken in terms of performance-enhancing drugs, until we get to a point where the overuse of painkillers becomes against the rules, with the amount of money involved, the stakes involved, players playing for new contracts, academy players desperate to be kept on at a club, players trying to prove that in their 30s that maybe they have the ability to get on another 2 years and get another 2-year deal. Their livelihoods are at stake. This is always going to happen.
Paul Kimmage writes at one point that the World Anti-Doping Agency, this is via Hajar Seppelt, who's he's spoken to, defines its 3 criteria in anti-doping code. So a substance should be added to the prohibited list if any of these things, if it helps enhance sporting performance, if it represents a health risk, or if taking it violates the spirit of the sport. Painkillers, he makes the point, tick a couple of those boxes but get a free pass. And then there's a quote from a WADA science director, Oliver Rabin, who says, "There is a general opinion that painkillers are not performance enhancing." I mean, it would strike me that painkillers are absolutely performance enhancing, but they're not against the rules. That is where we are when it comes to this world, Paul.
It is again the context of the medicalization of sport, where everybody seeks an edge, whatever that edge may be, and you see the stuff which we'll probably talk about in a minute on nutrition that the Mail on Sunday has. Again, that's the same within the same story here of people trying to find an edge, and of the difficulties of drawing lines in sport around not just what can be taken and what can't be taken, but how much of a thing can be taken before it can be considered performance enhancing. Now, it's not just painkillers, of course, it's anti-inflammatories. Again, something like Difene, which anybody who's been in dressing rooms will understand the players who take Difene in order to get themselves through games. And on a more basic level, there are people who throw in painkillers so they can get through a round of golf to ease back pain that they may suffer on the way around, and so on. It is not something that is the preserve of elite sport. It is the preserve of people who wish to compete or to play at all. And in fairness to WADA, in fairness to them, drawing the line and is one thing, but then attempting to police that line is altogether another. And what's absolutely apparent at the moment is that WADA has been unable even to manage those boundaries that exist already, and to put painkillers and anti-inflammatories in there as well becomes even more difficult.
I don't think it's possible, Paul, at all, though, is it? I can never envisage a day where WADA are able to put in place structured guidelines as to what constitutes a crossing of the line when it comes to medicalization of sport. There are some clubs in professional rugby that, if there was a case and we got to the stage where you couldn't take these sort of things to get your players out onto the field, they simply would be unable to field a team for some games in a league, for example, as competitive as the Gallagher Premiership. Because I said all players are probably carrying a knock at some stage. I think the deep lying aspect to this is parents who are trying to encourage their children to get involved in really physically demanding contact sports. If you're a mother or a father of a teenager, do you want he or she to be involved in a sport where they're almost certainly going to be driven to dipping into a bag to take a few painkillers to get themselves onto the field? Is that what you envisage for the future of your son or daughter? Because I don't ever see a day where taking some Difene or a painkiller or an anti-inflammatory is going to see you fall foul of the dope testers.
Yeah, it comes back down to what people are willing to do to win or to play. And it's not just professional sport, it's amateur sport. And the wages of amateur sport are medals. And people, I'd say if you asked any serious footballer or hurler in the country whether they would play in an All-Ireland final or play in a county final or play in a really significant match, and to get through that match they needed painkillers and anti-inflammatories, I would say that there are very, very few who would decline to take them. And again, it's part of that desire to win, and it's part of a desire also in another way to find an edge. This investigation in the Mail on Sunday, where they come back to it this week after last week's, and for those there's a kind of an extraordinary paragraph in the middle of a report it's tagged an investigation by Nick Harris, Edmund Willison and Rob Draper, and they refer to their disclosures last week in the Mail on Sunday about this drink form of a supplement, which is much more than a supplement. It's about the effects on diet, on energy, metabolism of a Delta G, which is a ketone drink. And in referring to their report last week, the paragraph reads, the first sentence is fairly striking in itself. Last weekend, the Mail on Sunday revealed that UK Sport asked their athletes to sign waivers, taking responsibility for any risks as well as non-disclosure agreements, promising not to talk about the project. Now, that's striking in itself. But the second sentence in this paragraph tells you just where the world of sport has gone. It says, the substance was originally developed for the US Army and according to UK Sport documents for US Special Forces. And this sense that something should be appropriate for the elite unit of an army because of what it does to energy metabolism, obviously in time of war, and it being adapted by UK Sport in order to better prepare its athletes for the 2012 Olympic Games it's really startling, and that those games, do you know what? It's not startling. It's what it is it's shocking, and it's shocking not in the sense that it's surprising, but that it's a reminder once again of how far down this road that the Olympic sports have travelled when it comes to that very elite level.
Yeah, we touched on this last week. The Oxford professor is the follow-up piece this week, and she says she's amazed, shocked by the revelations last week that this was used by British athletics. She had no idea this was going on. This was originally the ketone drink was for special forces behind enemy lines, so they would make do with less food and have more energy. So it was for special forces, and then 91 British athletes used it. I think 20 to 25 of them had to pull out because they were having adverse side effects to the thing, and the rest continued. But so the professor behind it at Oxford has said she's shocked it was used.
But they were guinea pigs, basically.
Well, that was the phrase used last week. Yeah, they were guinea pigs. It had never been used in competition before.
And this is a state agency who is essentially running these things through its athletes, and it's a reminder again of the politicized nature of sport. And anybody who tries to talk about the sport being living outside politics, just look at how important those Olympic Games were to people in Britain. Just look at how many medals they wish to win and to claim for their own, and look at what UK Sport was willing to do to experiment with such a product on 91 athletes. And it is very, very striking that so many should have been forced to pull out because of side effects. That tells you precisely the nature of the trial that was underway here.
Dave, I would feel like ever since we started doing the pay-per review, in particular on Sunday papers, Sunday Times investigations, this theme comes up, I don't know how often, every second week. We talk about it, we're dismayed by it, the medicalisation of sport is discussed at length, and on we go. Do you ever envisage a time where, wherever that line is in the sand, you know, between, allowed by the rules and not allowed by the rules, there's never going to be a time where elite athletes are not going to go right up to the line in every which way they can? That is just the reality of sport.
It is the reality of sport. The stakes are too big. Whether it's, the billions that's involved in football, or whether it's an individual contract that maybe an injured player is trying to get signed again. Maybe in the NFL, for example, we know that the shelf life of NFL players is under 2.5 years at the moment, and you'll do whatever you can to get yourself through an injury. As long as there's money involved, prestige and wealth and riches, you will always have those that are not only willing to go right to the edge of the line, they'll go well beyond it, and they will hope that they can cook the system to the point where they won't be caught. But this piece harks back to a different era. It goes back to beyond the Iron Curtain in the 1970s and 80s, and the stories we would have heard coming from some Eastern European countries and their state-sponsored attempts to try and add to their medal haul at Olympic Games and World Championships. I'm very surprised by this sort of a development. But
it was legal. I mean, it was a risk because it had never been used in competition. So there was an element of as Paul says, guinea pigs to the whole thing. But it was legal. It's just it was right up to the line, and it certainly wasn't what the ketone drink was invented for. But it was legal.
Absolutely. I get that. It's almost certain that no rules have been broken here.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if you and Paul agree. This piece in the Irish Mail on Sunday and the Paul Kimmage's piece in the Sunday Independent, to me, are about two very different things.
Go on.
I don't think this is necessarily linked to the medicalisation of sport, in that it is about players doing whatever they can do to mask pain to get themselves onto the field. This is experimenting with a substance that has yet to be declared on the banned list, but without the knowledge really in depth of the people who are actually taking it. That's why we refer to them as guinea pigs. It's why they're referred to as guinea pigs within the piece itself. It's very different from a player in changing room at half-time, like Jordan Henderson, taking a couple of tablets to ensure that his knee can get him through the second half of a football match.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
They spoke about your arm not being down beside your side. I mean, this is not Irish dancing.
OTB Sports Radio.
Basketball would have been my main game.
The brand new sports radio station from Off the Ball.
That's my point. Don't play for us if you're a proud Englishman.
Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Alexa.
You have a whole new world of possibilities.
Now available on otbsports.com.
This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Right, a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, if you, for example, are a podcast subscriber, then you've missed a little highlight from the Sunday papers. It was Dave McIntyre and Paul Rouse talking with Joe about a range of issues, including the medicalisation of sport and the return to play that we've seen over the weekend from the GAA. If you want to get in touch this morning, you can just WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number, or of course you can always just leave a comment on the YouTube stream that you're probably watching this on, or indeed if you're watching us on Twitter, then feel free to use the hashtag OTBAM. The best place to listen to us these days is on our radio station, which is OTB Sports Radio, and you get that on the OTB Sports app, which you can get free gratis and for nothing if you just search OTB Sports in the App Store. Owen Sheehan, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, sure. How are things?
Very good. It's one of those weekends to give a bit of comfort to the soul, where people were out playing sport again on fields, taking it very seriously, and we're all back to normal. Away we go.
Away we go is right. It was kind of an interesting feeling, wasn't it, that people were actually out and about doing things that they might ordinarily do. Like, it kind of feels that we're stuck in a time loop now where the actual date in the calendar doesn't really matter. And it is unusual that on the weekend, in slap bang in the middle of July, there is actual club action ongoing, and that is the centrepiece of Irish sport, the small bit of Irish sport that we do have ongoing at the moment. It's been great. It's going to be something that is going to be spoken about for all the off-the-pitch reasons over the next little while, especially because the GAA want to get more people into grounds. But for what it was, we saw some great moments of innovation of people trying to actually get a look at games. Saw one fella in the front of a digger, for example. Saw people climbing trees.
People in the back seats of cars and front seats of cars in their own bubble.
The way it should be, really, for a number of reasons. It's easy to keep your distance from other supporters when you're actually in a car. Second of all, you have the amplification of beeping.
Who's the guy with the golf? It looks like it must be a pitch and putt, is it? Or it looked, well, okay. So there's a picture here of what looks like a pitch and putt mat. Now, maybe it's somebody playing pitch and putt beside the GAA. It could also be somebody's back garden, which happens to be right up against the wire of the local GAA club. And he's built a little tee for himself. But he's also facing in the direction where it might be about to take the head off somebody. Some poor young corner forward goes up for the ball. Smack. Golf ball straight in the face.
The slow play on that particular pitch and putt course was at its worst over the course of the weekend. But we need the people in the car as well. They have the added boost of being able to beep the horn, beep, beep, and cheer on their team. That was one of the things actually that went unnoticed in one of the early golf competitions that we had during lockdown. What was one where you had the 2v2 match play involving Rory and Justin Thomas, one of them, and Ricky Fowler. Ricky Fowler was definitely playing because when he landed a 30-foot putt, there was somebody parked up beside the green who was beeping him as he did it. And I was like, you don't get that anywhere except for the GAA and maybe on a random golf course.
The Tom Brady playing golf week, that seems like it was about 1972. That's when that seems to have happened. And yet it's probably like 6 weeks ago, is it? Is it
Yeah,
7 weeks
it could
ago?
have been the middle of last week, to be honest. I don't know is the straight up answer to you. What year is it? Where are we?
I'm sticking with 1972. Here's what's coming up on the show. We're going to speak with Shane Hannon in just a moment. After that, Kenny Cunningham standing by to talk to us about a big weekend in football. If you have any football questions, if you have anything you want to get off your chest, if you want to talk about David De Gea, for example, feel free. 087 918 180 is the number. We are talking GAA at around about 9:15 this morning. Michael Quinlivan was back playing some action, so we're going to get a player's take on what it was actually like to, change in the stands or arrive togged out. And then we're revisiting the injustice that was done to us on Friday when the incorrect results were given out on this very show. A very poor standard of lazy journalism, I want to say, Owen. Lazy, shoddy journalism. We'll get to that a little bit later on. In the meantime, Shane Hannon, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very good, lads. And how are you keeping yourselves?
How was your recovery weekend?
It was grand, yeah. Felt great. Feeling quite smug this morning, I'm not going to lie. Ordinarily, I would wake up, have a cup of tea and maybe a glass of water with me. But I've got my orange juice this morning. I just feel that little bit extra this morning, Jerry. I'm feeling fresh.
You're feeling yourself, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair.
It was good. It was enjoyable. The legs, I will admit, were quite sore the next day, but it was an enjoyable run and cycle. And look, all for a great cause as well. Yeah, well, look, we'll talk in some detail about this a little bit later on, but there is plenty of sports news coming through after a weekend where Watford managed to elbow their way onto centre stage, despite the fact there was 2 FA Cup semi-finals going on. So where are you starting with? I'll start with the FA Cup. I should mention as well, I think that pitch and putt course is Lorcan O'Toole Park in Kimmage. I know it's right beside a pitch and putt course, and I think there was photos of it going viral around the weekend. Right, that would make sense. So I think that's the pitch in Kimmage. It's not somebody's back garden, because it kind of looks, just from the angle, that could be your... Yeah, it's pretty close, isn't it? It's right there. But we'll kick off with the FA Cup, and that semi-final occurred yesterday evening, behind closed doors, of course, at Wembley. Chelsea will take on Arsenal next month in the final of this season's FA Cup. That's on the 1st of August, in fact. Frank Lampard's side comfortable 3-1 winners over Manchester United at Wembley last night. David De Gea at fault for 2 of Chelsea's goals, as United were beaten 3-1 in that game. United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, speaking afterwards, says his keeper knows what he did wrong.
David knows he should have saved the second goal. It's hard for a keeper to make amends. It's so much easier for outfield players. But David showed in the rest of the game. Of course, he made a few good saves, but he knows he could have saved that one.
Arsenal secured their place in the final with a 2-0 win over Manchester City on Saturday. Leicester City's hopes of finishing in the Premier League's top 4 were dealt a big blow after they lost 3-0 away at Spurs yesterday. At the bottom of the table, Bournemouth lost 2-0 against Southampton. That leaves them 3 points off safety with just 1 game remaining. Tonight, Wolves can move back up to 6th with a win against Crystal Palace. Sheffield United must beat Everton to keep their outside hopes of Europa League qualification alive. Elsewhere tonight, Brighton host Newcastle. You mentioned it already, Jared, but Watford confirming head coach Nigel Pearson has left the club with immediate effect. He's the 3rd managerial casualty at Vicarage Road this season. Hayden Mullins and Graham Stack will look after the first team for their final 2 games of the campaign, with the club currently 3 points above the relegation zone. It should be mentioned they were bottom of the table when Nigel Pearson took over the club back in December. Barnsley kept their hopes of championship survival alive with an injury time winner against Nottingham Forest yesterday. That 1-0 win leaves the Yorkshire club 2 points from safety going into the final round of games on Wednesday. Champions Leeds continue their celebrations with a hungover 3-1 win at Derby County. To matters in Spain, Lionel Messi won his 7th La Liga Golden Boot and his 4th in a row after scoring twice in Barcelona's 5-0 win over Alaves on the final day. The Barca captain finished for the season on 25 goals, 4 clear of Real Madrid striker Karim Benzema. Champions Madrid drew their final game 2-2 yesterday, which relegated opponents Legan to the 2nd division. Celta Vigo's goalless draw at Espanyol enough to keep them up by a single point at the expense of Legan. Captain Sergio Ramos netted his 12th goal of the season by heading in from Isco's cross for Real, who had, of course, wrapped up the title in their previous game. Spain's John Ram is golf's new world number 1. The 25-year-old won the Memorial Tournament in Ohio last night with a final round of 75, enough for him to win by 3 shots from American Ryan Palmer. He was on 9 under par. Ram is the 2nd Spaniard after Seve Ballesteros to top the world rankings. He replaces Rory McIlroy, who finished back on 4 over after a 78 yesterday. Meanwhile, Jack Nicklaus has revealed he and his wife Barbara both contracted COVID-19 in March but have since recovered. Speaking on CBS during a final round weather delay of the Memorial presented by Nationwide, he hosts that tournament at Muirfield Village in Ohio. Nicklaus said the couple stayed at home for more than a month and managed to get through the virus without too much complication, thankfully. And finally for me this morning, lads, Lewis Hamilton leads Formula One's World Championship after winning yesterday's Hungarian Grand Prix on the wet. Max Verstappen of Red Bull took 2nd, with Hamilton's Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas home in 3rd. Hamilton has now won 2 of the first 3 races this season, following last weekend's win in Austria.
Shane, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. We'll speak with Shane a little bit later on, when we will allow him to, do his victory lap, I believe. And we will also correct some of the erroneous reporting that happened on this show on Friday about our BMW Run and Ride 4 Pieta, which Shane was the winner in, but we all know who the real winner was. 087 918 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us by WhatsApp this morning, or you can always just use the hashtag OTBAM. That was interesting that Jack Nicklaus ended up having COVID. I didn't realise that, Owen. He did say that he was going to shake hands with the winner on at that Memorial. I was like, that's a bit, but obviously he believes in the science that he's got the antibodies now and isn't going to be giving it to anybody. He's not going to get it again. I presume he believes in the science as opposed to just like Donald Trump style. What's the big deal? I'm not sure though.
I guess if you're an 80-year-old man and you've managed to beat COVID, you probably feel like Superman. And there's a little bit of here's a situation where everybody's kind of younger than me and more powerful than me and able to withstand it. And look at me, I was able to survive it. So perhaps that's what's giving him his carefree attitude. I don't know. And
you know what? He didn't shake hands. He went out with the fist bump. Somebody obviously had a little word. Maybe you should, not actually shake hands. You should just do a fist bump or something, Jack, because, you don't want to give John Ram COVID. And fair play to John Ram for not shaking hands, but for fist bumping. I mean, I don't know what the... How bad is the bar allowed from a fist bump versus a handshake?
The question for me is that the fist bump which turns into a hug, which is then the kind of default for any Premier League manager at the moment.
Yeah, right. Speaking of Premier League, let's talk football, let's talk Premier League, and also let's talk about what's going on in the FA Cup and with the top teams. Kenny Cunningham is with us. Kenny, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. All good.
I want to start with, not usual to start with a situation like Watford, but it's great when you set a record like Watford have for being the first team to sack 3 managers in a season. A remarkable scenario that they find themselves in with 2 games left to go, 3 points clear of the relegation zone. Even if you've had a massive fight with Nigel Pearson, maybe you should let him see the season out and then sack him.
I wouldn't agree with that necessarily, Ger. I think there has been a huge turnover in managers of the club the past couple of seasons, but I think by and large you'd have to say it's worked for them. I take your point on the surface. That's probably the general consensus. What are they thinking of? What are they doing? Sacking the manager with 2 games of the season to go. But if they've been looking at performances of late, and particularly that first half against West Ham, Ger, I mean that was a huge game. I mean that was a huge game for both sides. Nobody was underestimating the importance of a win for either team in that particular game. I mean, it was guaranteed survival for any team that won that game, as is the case with West Ham now that they've won it. And the kind of performance levels in that first half would have been set the alarm bells ringing in the Watford boardroom. Okay, you can get beaten any game of football at any given time, but just kind of the application of the players, the kind of mentality in that first 45 minutes was way below what you would have expected. Even the intensity, Jerry, getting around the pitch, making tackles, making runs off the ball, and it just wasn't there. So really, when you look at it, after that initial, Watford have sacked the manager, what are they doing? If you actually look at it in a little bit more detail, I don't think it's that surprising, particularly with these owners. And I'd actually reserve judgment till after the season in terms of where Watford have finished before I'd commit myself to the opinion that they've made a huge error or a big gaffe in terms of sacking Nigel Pearson.
But how much can happen in 2 games, Kenny? Like, it's an unbelievably weird time to sack somebody. Like, I get the situation with Watford's past and all that, but it's 2 games.
Well, exactly. I'd use that as the counter argument, to be honest with you. We see the kind of bounce effect on in terms of a new manager coming in, and whether somebody who comes in from the outside, I mean, I haven't heard if they've actually appointed anybody as yet. I'm not sure if you have. Whether that'll be an internal appointment, somebody on the coaching staff, or they're literally jetting somebody in from the outside, we'll kind of wait and see. But obviously, they're looking for that kind of bit of a bounce and a bit of a reaction from the dressing room. It's almost like a little bit of shock treatment, CPR for the dressing room. You might just get some kind of reaction out of them, because there's some talent in that dressing room. I mean, I didn't think they'd be in this position, but it hasn't been, even apart from the West Ham game, lads, it hasn't been great since they've come back post-lockdown. I mean, I wasn't particularly impressed with how they handled the period away from the competitive football, to be honest with you. I felt there was a lot of negativity around the club during that period. A lot of people very vocal, a number of the players, their captain in particular, a lot of reasons given why they didn't want to come back and play football. And when push came to the shove, that's exactly what happened. Their captain never returned. A couple of the players took their lead from him, didn't come back, and that was only the individual training, didn't come back to the football club. Even their manager, to be honest with you, I read a comment from Nigel Pearson to the effect that he was hoping, he was praying to God that there wouldn't be a fatality amongst the footballing fraternity off the back of this COVID-19. So all of that for me, to be honest with you, didn't lend itself to a real kind of positive mindset coming back to football. So maybe it has been such a huge surprise that he hasn't got the type of reaction from the players that he would have wanted. But there is some real quality there, particularly in wide areas. Sarr for me and Welbeck are still going to be instrumental for them in the next couple of games. But there's 2 difficult games, lads. I mean, it's Arsenal away last game of the season and Manchester City at home, and they're really in trouble. They're in real trouble. I mean, it looks as if Bournemouth probably only have to win their last game of the season with the kind of goal difference potentially to get themselves out of trouble. So I'm actually not shocked and surprised by the decision, and ultimately it might prove to be the right one.
Okay, let's go on and talk about the FA Cup semi-finals this weekend. Let's talk about David De Gea, right? What do you do? What do you do if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and week in, week out, oh, he's the best goalkeeper in the world, I still have faith in him, and then he does that twice in a match? What do you do?
Yeah, I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure if it's a massive decision for Solskjaer to make. I think he's backed him enough now, Solskjaer. I mentioned some time ago there might be a decision he'd have to make in the summer. Dean Henderson coming back to the football club potentially from Sheffield United. He's had a great season there. I think it's a big step up coming from Sheffield United, don't get me wrong, to the regular Manchester United goalkeeper. My gut feeling told me he was going to stick with the guy. They given him the big contract. Publicly, he's come out and supported the goalkeeper time and time again. So I think he's going to stick with him. I don't see anything changing. I think DeGea will be there next season. As long as Solskjaer is certain that DeGea is focused, he's totally committed to the football club. I don't think there'll be a big change there. I take your point, Jerry, in terms of mistakes. And there's been a number of them over the past, maybe you could go back 12 months, 18 months. He hasn't been at the level the last couple of years for Manchester United that he was a couple of years before that. That's an absolute given. But I certainly wouldn't write him off, DeGea. There'll be a bit of noise around him, I'm sure, over maybe the next couple of weeks. But I don't envisage it changing this summer. I think he'll stick with him. I think it's the right thing to do. I think he will bounce back, DeGea. And I think the more interesting issues around the Manchester United team are in different areas of the pitch.
Well, let's stick with the goalkeeper for a minute, because what do you do with them with Henderson? Because I've just checked his age there. Henderson turned 23 last March, so he's not 24 until next March. Do you bring Henderson back, and so next time De Gea has an issue, it's like, Grant, we now have a replacement, and like bring him in? Or do you leave Henderson for one more season to be out there in the world becoming much better by getting 45, 60 games under his belt next season? How do you manage that resource that you have?
I don't think you take him back. I don't think you can. First of all, I don't think Henderson would be happy to come back and sit on the bench, having had a taste of Premiership football, particularly at Sheffield United, and kind of the plaudits which he's had. And obviously his game has improved, his kind of mindset, confidence levels, etc. Even a bit of an ego thing as well, Ger. From Dean Henderson's point of view, I don't think there's any way he'd want to come back and sit on the bench and play second fiddle to David De Gea on the off chance he has a bad run of games and he might get an opportunity. So from Henderson's point of view, I'm sure there's no way him or his representatives would want their player to come back and sit on the bench at the football club. And even I think that sends the wrong message to David De Gea by bringing Henderson back and sitting him on the bench. Solskjaer indirectly, I think, Jared is telling De Gea, I've actually lost a bit of confidence in you here. I can't afford to let this goalkeeper go out on loan for another year, because I really haven't got confidence.
Yeah, but is that not fair enough? Is he not within his right to say, what are you doing? Like, privately, what are you doing week in, week out? You're making these mistakes and it's costing us. It's cost us place in the cup final here. It's cost us enough points now at this stage that we'd be actually comfortably in third and probably already guaranteed Champions League football. How do you pressurise a goalkeeper to play better? Like, in a normal scenario, you'd have a left back who was making mistakes. You buy another left back and let them fight it out, and whoever's the best man wins.
Yeah, I think you're right. The goalkeeper's position almost stands alone. It's quite a unique position. I think he will have those conversations with De Gea. Probably not as dramatic a fashion of you suggested there with your high-pitched voice, but yeah, I think he will. But that comes back to good man management. Yeah, that's what good managers do. They sit players down, they have conversations, they get into their head, they say exactly the right things at the right moment to get them on side and to get them back on track. So I'm sure he will do that. I don't think it'll be a case of a shouting and screaming match inside the confines of Carrington training ground. But I'm sure he'll have a mature, sensible conversation with De Gea and just get him in his head, because that's all it is. We know how good a goalkeeper he is, but he has been making too many mistakes. So it's just a case, I think, of just getting him in the right kind of headspace, saying the right things, and getting him kind of refocused and maybe a little remotivated to a certain extent for the start of next season.
Okay. Do you not start Sergio Romero in the next game, Kenny? Do you not actually lay down a marker and say, if this is the standard at which you are playing at Manchester United, it's simply not good enough? It still gives you the avenue for De Gea to work his way back into the starting team, but is a private conversation enough to send a positive message to the rest of the dressing room?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right on. It's a good point. I think you have to look at it in terms of the effect a decision like that, when you take a player of De Gea's stature out of the team, the effect that has on the rest of the dressing room. I think that has to be a small factor as well. I don't think that'll happen, to be honest with you. I think there's an argument to be made for it. Maybe taking out taking him out of the team, and maybe the message that sends around the dressing room. I don't think with a player of De Gea's standing, that's the thing you want to do. And in fact, you can lose a player. Certain players, you might say it's the wrong kind of attitude, but you take that course with certain players and you lose them totally. They kind of switch off. That's it. You've humiliated me. I'm having a bad time. I need your support. You've made it even worse. You've thrown me under a bus by taking me out of out of team. You've ridiculed me. You've hung me out to dry. Some players would take that attitude. So that's exactly the position you don't want to be in. So, yeah, I take your point. You've got to think the player first and foremost, and the dressing room. And I do have two massive games coming up, West Ham at home and Leicester away. But for me, by taking DeGea out and bringing another goalkeeper in, it only heaps massive pressure on that your second goalkeeper, whoever it is, who comes in for those last two games. I don't think there's a decision to be made, really. I think DeGea will play these last two games. They're absolutely huge games for me, not just in the context of Manchester United season, but in terms of going forward and potentially Champions League football for this group of players next season.
The last thing I just have to ask you about in this, Kenny, is that there's often been a case where if a goalkeeper starts to lose their confidence, it can be a very, very tough position to get it back. Like, I may just be kind of having a little bit of a tunnel vision here, because there's been some very important examples in recent history when you've got Joe Hart at Manchester City. When he started to lose things, it was very, very difficult, it seemed, for him to get it back. It seemed it was the case as well with the two goalkeepers Liverpool had before they brought in Alisson. That is the fear that Manchester United now have, where they look at Manchester City and Liverpool. Not only have they spent big to get in a good replacement, the goalkeepers that departed before that, once they started to go on a downward slump, they couldn't arrest that, basically.
No, it's a good point. And that's why I think there is a decision to be made in surrounding DeGea. And I think if we're talking about Solskjaer having those conversations with DeGea potentially over the summer, the season's going to finish more or less in a week's time, although they have the Europa football coming down the line. But I think on the flip side, if Solskjaer was to get a sense talking to DeGea, that there was a little bit of unhappiness there, that he'd lost a little bit of motivation. He was looking back towards Spain, or homesick, or personal issues, or just a lack of whatever it was. I think if Solskjaer gets a sense of that, having these discussions that we're talking about with DeGea over the coming weeks, well, I think then there is an argument for taking that bold step, that right, it's in the club's best interest to take Henderson back from Sheffield United. We feel as if he has all the attributes, confidence-wise, at the highest level it's ever been. Yes, there's always an element of risk in terms of bringing him back into the cauldron of Old Trafford. Can his personality handle it? Can he deal with the kind of pressure of being Manchester United's number one? But that's a possibility. He could show the guy that the door, get a healthy transfer fee, get him off their wage bill, and you'd like to think he potentially has got the ready-made replacement in Henderson there. So I'm not saying that's no way that's going to happen, but that'll all be dependent on those conversations Solskjaer has with De Gea, and just being very intuitive as a manager. Get the sense off the player. Can I trust this fella going forward for the next 2 to 4 years? Because that's the kind of what Solskjaer's looking at with this group of players now at Manchester United, the age profile, in terms of how can they develop and what they can achieve in that next period of time. And can De Gea be an integral part of that? Has he got the kind of personality? Has he got the motivation to get himself back to that level that he has been at previously, lads? So they're the kind of questions I suppose Solskjaer wrestle with maybe over the coming weeks and months.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Just one last point on that, and we don't even need to weather the storm or labour too much. The next 6 months is probably going to be football behind closed doors, so it might be the perfect time to introduce a goalkeeper to a club where there isn't actually going to be that cauldron of pressure and stuff. So maybe that'll factor into the thinking. The game itself, and you were about to say that there are other areas of the field where they need to strengthen. Was that the difference between the sides? Actually, the goalkeeping errors were not incidental, because they were very important in that they resulted in goals, but that actually Manchester United aren't quite ready to be competing on a bunch of different fronts at the moment, because they don't have the strength and depth, and at some point your squad is going to get caught out in big games when every game is a big game.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Ger, but the reason why Manchester United got beat yesterday, you looked at the starting 11s yesterday, United's team sheet came in terms of the shape of the team, the personnel, and I never fancied United to win that game. And it wasn't because they hadn't got better players, Jerry, because they were sat on the bench. So I think you're probably right in indicating the strength and depth of the Chelsea squad at the moment is probably superior to that of Manchester United, and that's a fair point. I think if Manchester United had been able to put, United played well that back three system towards the tail end just before lockdown, lads. I remember going to Chelsea and playing really well. Luke Shaw played left of the three, and I think they had Martial played up front with Rashford. So I think if you think of the personnel with that particular formation, I think it actually quite suits the Manchester United team, but it just wasn't strong enough. You kind of James up front, and Pogba sat on the bench as well. That bit of a lack of a creative spark in midfield, and Boy in at the back, who's you feast or famine. You never know what you're going to get with him. So yeah, it just wasn't. The team just wasn't strong enough, Jared. But I could understand it because of the importance of the games coming up for Manchester United, in particular at home against West Ham. Funnily enough, off the back of the less result at Tottenham, made a convincing victory against West Ham in a couple of days' time. Pretty much guarantees Champions League football, regardless of the outcome of the final game against Leicester. So clearly, for over the last week or so, Solskjaer's been looking at the fixtures, and he's had to make a decision and prioritise certain games. And he's looked at the game yesterday, the game midweek against West Ham United, and come to the conclusion, and the right one for me, that the home game against West Ham United is far more significant for this Manchester United team presently and going forward than that FA Cup semi-final. And that's the sobering reality. And as I said, a convincing win against West Ham midweek, with the introduction of those players who kind of missed out, Martial coming back in, and Pogba, I'd imagine, to come back into the team. They'll revert back to that 4-3-3 shape, which has been so successful for them since post-lockdown, and ultimately it'll probably be proved right.
The talk over the last few weeks, Kenny, had been whether or not Manchester United can challenge the top two next season in the Premier League. I think possibly a more accurate question would be, can Chelsea be that team to potentially break into the top two? Like, it's been an outstanding season for them, and the news off the pitch kind of gets better when you see the likes of Kai Havertz saying he wants to leave Bayer Leverkusen this summer. If a player is available this summer, Chelsea look best placed to actually bring them in. And with a manager of Frank Lampard's qualities still learning, it's an unbelievably exciting time to be a supporter of Chelsea, I'd imagine, to be a player involved with Chelsea Football Club. Can they get to that next level next season and actually potentially start to break the top two mould?
I think they could. Whether they can break the top two depends on those kind of marquee signings which they can bring in the summer. And depending on who those players are. Kai Havertz, we've spoken about him before, an outstanding player. Just didn't feel as if that centre midfield area in relation to those attacking midfielders was necessarily priority from a Chelsea's point of view. You got the likes of Kovacic, Loftus-Cheek, Mason Mount, who can operate in those kind of advanced midfield areas. But clearly, a player of the quality of Havertz comes available, you've got to be interested. He might take the opinion Lampard, as good as those players are, he might be prepared to offload a couple of those players, Loftus-Cheek in particular, and get money in the door and actually go and invest in someone of the quality of Havertz. But I think he gets one or two of those marquee players in. For me, it's still a centre half. We spoke about it before. We know where the areas are. We spoke about it before. Centre half for me, he's still searching for an ideal pair there. He went to a back three. It worked kind of reasonably well. But if his favourite system is going to be a kind of 4-3-3 system, which we've seen for most of the season, for me, he hasn't got a natural pair in there at centre half. He dropped Rudiger out of the team a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't happy with his performances, and he's constantly searching for a partnership there at centre half. He hasn't got a left back. He's crying out for left back, but there's a few good ones of them around the place. He could potentially bring one of them in. So very exciting times. You're absolutely right. I think it's a hugely talented squad. Profile, the age of the squad, it's only going to get better. But in terms of challenging, actually breaking up that top two, I think it is possible for the next season. But he has to get those two additional signings for me. Left back, centre half, and that central midfield. For me, another central midfield player of high quality, defensively minded player for me, and they're not far off. There's the potential there to break up that top two next season.
Really? That good?
Yeah, I think it is that good. Yeah, I really do. I mean, Ziyech's a wonderful player. I don't know if people have seen enough of him. I'm really impressed with him the past couple of seasons. Wenger's a very dangerous player. Versatility as well. That's what I like about Chelsea, the versatility of their players. They operate off, Pulisic can operate off either flanks, even as a number 10. Werner's the same. Mason Mount, very flexible, can accommodate him in any different areas of the pitch. I actually didn't like Chelsea's midfield two yesterday, Kovacic and Jorginho. I mean, there's no future in those two in centre midfield. But Kante will come back into the team. And I look at those two teams yesterday, lads, and I think I had this conversation with you last week. I look at both those teams yesterday, and one player for me to go into both of those teams that would take him almost to the next level is Declan Rice. Declan Rice is better than any of those defenders who played in either of those back threes yesterday. Manchester United and Chelsea's. He makes those back threes significantly better. He goes into any of those midfield yesterday. The Chelsea midfield, he improves dramatically. And the Manchester United midfield, the pairing of Matic and Fred, he improves dramatically because of his all-round game. You can't pigeonhole him as a defence-minded midfielder or an attacking midfield. It's his all-round game, Declan's mobility, athleticism, that defensive mindset he has, his ability actually to play forward and be penetrating with his pass and actually go box to box, which you don't see a lot of, which he can do as well. So looking at both those teams, you're asking me, can Chelsea make a charge next season, break up the top two? Can Manchester United make a charge and break up the top two? If there was one player out there at the moment for me who could take him potentially to that next level because of his ability to be accommodated in both positions at centre-half and centre midfield and actually excel in both those positions, it's Declan Rice. I'd be absolutely amazed if one of those teams don't make a serious push to get him to their football clubs in the summer.
All right, Kenny, we'll let you go. Good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us.
Nice one, lads. Take care.
Yeah, it's Kenny Cunningham there giving us some thoughts about the football at the weekend. Of course, the Premier League is hurtling towards its conclusion. You'll hear it exclusively live on Off the Ball. You can hear it every weekend. You can get it, of course, on the OTB Sports app. But here's some of the stuff you missed from the weekend just gone.
Here he is attacking into the box. Son has a shot. It comes off the Leicester City defender, Justin, and that's a really fortunate deflection for Tottenham Hotspur. Son with a shot just inside the box, and it came off the heel of Justin, the Leicester City right wing back, and into the goal. That's 5 minutes on the clock. It's Tottenham Hotspur 1, Leicester City 0. Tottenham are on the attack. Lo Celso plays a ball out left to Lucas. They're 20 yards from the Tottenham goal. Lucas plays the ball inside the box to Harry Kane, and Harry Kane hits it with his left foot into the far side of the goal. It's Tottenham Hotspur 2, Leicester City 0. A brilliant counter-attacking move from Tottenham Hotspur, and it's finished off by their goal scorer, top goal scorer, Harry Kane. 37 minutes on the clock. Tottenham 2, Leicester City 0. A little bit too much on that pass. He's forced out to the far side of the penalty area. And then it's a shot with his right foot into the far post. Harry Kane, what a goal for Tottenham Hotspur, who take a 3-0 lead against Leicester City. And it looks like it's going to be a severe hammering for Leicester City this afternoon in London. 40 minutes on the clock. It's Tottenham Hotspur 3, Leicester City 0.
There was a crazy couple of minutes there where Danny Ings scored the goal, and then news came through pretty much at the same time that Watford had sacked Nigel Pearson. So Watford are fourth from bottom. They were obviously beaten in that huge game on Friday night, well beaten by West Ham. But have put in some, very inconsistent, obviously, considering they're in this position. But he's only in the job since December. Can you understand what Watford have done?
Okay, one or two things have happened here. Either, he's gone real heavy on the players on Friday night after the game, or he's gone real heavy on them yesterday morning in training, and maybe he has lost the run of himself and went over the top, considering they're still in with a fighting chance. Maybe there was some sort of physical altercation. Maybe the changing room just went crazy. I don't know what's happened. That's one way of looking at it, and that's a distinct possibility. The other possibility is the owners have basically said to themselves, he's going to be gone in 2 games anyway. At the minute, with the curve that we're on, which is hurtling towards relegation, we might as well give ourselves a fighting chance. And maybe we get a manager in. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking a Sam Allardyce type character. I know that sounds absolute lunacy, and I know everyone out there saying it's crazy. But if you're a businessman and you're an owner of a football club, you want to give yourself a fighting chance. And maybe Pearson wasn't the man to turn it around. All they need is a point, or even not even a point. They just don't need 2 heavy defeats. If they could lose both games 1-0, they stay in the Premier League.
Well, they do have Villa to worry about as well.
That's true.
Unlikely as that may seem.
Okay, fair enough.
So you've been in a Sam Allardyce dressing room.
Yeah.
What does Sam Allardyce do in the space of 48 hours before you play Manchester City and then Arsenal?
Well, I tell you, Big Sam would walk in and he's a huge... Look, I mean, this is obviously... I know people are saying you're mad, it's a crazy decision, you didn't deserve that. But I can understand why they've did it. If it wasn't the first reason and something happened on Saturday morning and they're coming at it from this angle, I see why they've done it. But Big Sam would walk through that door, big hulk of a man, he'd walk in and he'd own the room straight away, and everybody would be quiet. Everybody, foreign players, English players, everybody would just sit down, and Sam would say, you need one result, and he would just, his presence would just lift the whole lift the whole place, really. I've been in that situation. Our first game when Sam Allardyce came in, and he came in and he just said, look, this is the team. It is what it is. If you don't like it, and he just has that presence about him. And he was fantastic for us for the back end of the season.
I get the sense you really like Sam Allardyce.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, really. I mean, look, if I was in a foxhole right now, one man I'd want to see walk through the door would be someone like Sam Allardyce, because I know that he has that in his locker, and I'm pretty sure for 2 games he could be financially entitled to come out of
I dare say he could
to come out for 1 game and just walk in a room.
What was it? Just his no-nonsense style?
He has a presence, and he would just, everybody would do what he'd say. He'd come in, he'd say, this is the way I want things done. And I'm pretty sure that with his track record and the way that he is, he'd be a great little fit for him. I'm just saying, if this is the angle the owners are going at, I'd be on the phone to him right now saying, Sam, can you come in for a week, please, and do a week's training? And he'd come in and he'd set the team up to at least not get hammered, and that gives him a chance.
I'll take your word for it. It'd be interesting.
It would be, and I know it's off the wall, but I understand it.
Is it that off the wall? I mean, it is, because they've obviously appointed Hayden Mullins, but Damien Delaney at least with an idea there. What are you thinking, Owen?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea whatsoever, and it's certainly not off the wall. I think they've got 2 potential avenues. If they hadn't gone with Mullins, they could have gone for the extremely exciting, exciting in press conferences and charismatic, a la Sam Allardyce, or they could have gone for the most boring man in the history of football in Claude Puel. I think if you look at the odds for the next Watford manager, I think Claude Puel is actually the favourite, and he would be an extremely Watford appointment. I see Chris Hughton's in the mix as well, like 3rd favourite at the moment. But if you were Chris Hughton, you surely cannot go to Watford. If you're a manager with any ambitions to carve out a career path, you just cannot go to Watford.
It's the best job in football. What are you talking about? You work for 3 months and you get paid for a year, and you get a second job and you just don't have any offset language in it. And like, yes, thanks very much. I'll sign a 3-year deal, please.
Do you agree with what Kenny was saying earlier on? Like, I think this is ridiculous from Watford. I just don't see how this turns out well. The way the players spoke about the manager throughout the last few weeks has always been glowing. Nigel Pearson has always been somebody who has attracted criticism for sure, but the cult of the manager has always been quite pronounced when he has been manager of a club. And you've Ben Foster saying it would have been a disaster a few weeks ago if he wasn't to be manager for the foreseeable future. Like, if they get relegated,
if they get relegated, I mean, the wages of sin are death, but it turns out football, that's not actually the case. OTBAM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. It is 8:37, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
I'll run you through what's going on. When Jack fed the ducks, Ireland, England and Big Jack, Kieran Bradley's great thoughtful piece about the relationship between England, Ireland and the North is live on OTB Sports now. You can also get it on our app. Watford should go for Big Sam. It's Damien Delaney making that point yesterday, and Nigel Pearson sacked with 2 matches left to go. John Ram is the new world #1, and we've got all the details from that on otbsports.com for you this morning as well. Very quickly, going to run you through the newspapers. The English newspapers all have De Gea. David De Howler is the Telegraph front page, which may actually be tab of the morning for you. De Gea future in doubt after horror show. Kenny doesn't seem to think it is, but I'm not sure. Chelsea's gifts from De Gea. Pearson acts after bust up, and there's also cricket on the back of the Times UK. Again, there's De Gea going, ooh, it's a very familiar pose from David De Gea in the back of the Guardian this morning. Trans women face potential ban from women's rugby. This is an exclusive from Sean Ingle. And Hamilton F1 is failing to take racism seriously, so Lewis Hamilton continuing to use his platform to make sure that the issue doesn't disappear. The back page of the Sun, disaster, as in De Gea, disaster. Did you get it, Owen? Did you get it? Axed Pearson out. New Hornets boss Mullins turns to Troy. So Troy Deeney is essentially going to be asked to lead the team over the last few games. Sweet puck all. Kilmacud Crokes distanced themselves from Ballybowden St Enda's yesterday by a whopping 14 points. Subs are having the crack with that. And there you go. Class action. TD says, raise crowd cap for sake of pupils. We'll get to that in a minute. The logic of Peter Fitzpatrick is just a little bit difficult to follow. Not the first time, I've got to say. But anyway, The Irish Times this morning has match reports from the FA Cup games and from the return of Harry Kane to some form, which suggests that Jose Mourinho is going to be okay there. And then Malky Clerkin has a piece about what it was like being in the press box yesterday for the game. And sorry, I had one more tabloid to do, which I'd missed, obviously. Now expect the Spanish Inquisition is what the Mirror's take on David De Gea's disastrous weekend in the Cup was. And they also have Vicar Rage Road. Pearson axed by Watford with 2 games left. Apparently he had a row with the owner, and it turns out you can't have a row with the owner at Watford because he sacks you. And then the Examiner is Chelsea leave Ole feeling blue and sweet win for Lampard. And also Daniel Story's talking about concussion after the Bailly injury there as well. So that's essentially the newspapers this morning for you. And the Irish Independent, Solskjaer defends De Gea after latest costly blunder. They also have a photograph from the game between Rathnew and Bray Emmets. Bray Emmets hammered Rathnew 4-13 to 12 points in the Wicklow Senior Football Championship Round 1 game. And Ger Brennan is the manager of Bray Emmets, turns out. I think Ger Brennan might still be playing football. I'm not sure at senior level. There was certainly strong speculation that he'd be lining out for Vincent's this year as well, so he might be double jobbing. But it's interesting. None of the lads there wearing masks in that photograph. And in the Daily Mail, Michael Clifford is praising the GAA for the GAA advised all spectators attending games should wear face coverings, the kind of unambiguous advice badly missing from the government when it was most needed. So we're obviously going to talk about the government being under pressure in our pressure rankings a little bit later on, and we're going to talk about Peter Fitzpatrick saying that you won't be able to convince parents to send their kids to schools unless we can have 500 people at a GAA match. As a parent, I don't see how these two things are the same. I don't really see the connection between 500 people at a GAA game and kids going to school. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe Peter Fitzpatrick is operating on a different intellectual plane from the rest of us, and he sees things we don't own. Maybe that's what's going on here.
Possibly, yeah. As you say, we'll be getting stuck into that in the pressure rankings later on, but it is a kind of an unusual comparison, I guess. So the point is that if you can't have 500 people at a GAA ground, you can't have people in school, or is it if you can't have people in school, you can't have 500 people at a GAA ground? Which is the chicken and which is the egg here? I'm a firm believer if we want the schools to open in September, then we have to allow greater numbers to attend matches, because if we can't deem that to be a safe thing to do in an outdoor environment, how are we going to convince people that going back to school is safe? There's a lot of misunderstanding of the science, I think. People kind of shaping things the way they want it to be, as opposed to following the trends and seeing what's happening. Yeah, like it's I don't know. It's something like that's on the back of the Irish Daily Mail this morning, isn't it? Yeah. Like, so his logic is that the safest, if you were to pick one of the safer things to do at the moment, it is to be outside at an outdoor environment, and everybody will be socially distanced, and everybody will be wearing masks, and less safe than that will be kids going back to the classroom. That's his logic, is it not? Like. The way he's thinking about it, perhaps, is that in school you're going to be indoors. In a classroom, you're going to have a greater chance of contracting the virus. He hasn't done a reasoned decision on his comments, but I wonder, is part of it as well that it might be easier to control people at a match rather than kids in a classroom, or is that maybe that's not true at all? Why are we talking about these things? Look, I just think that. Since John Horan came out and said, no, we want 500 at the matches, hurry up, essentially, there's been a slew of county board chairmen out saying fairly similar stuff on one side or on the other side, saying we might not even have games. We'll come back to this a little bit later on. Let's talk about some of the other stuff. The Nigel Pearson situation, it turns out some of the papers seem to suggest that there was a fight after the match against West Ham, and that they couldn't make it up all the way through until eventually they sacked him, but that they had actually wanted his assistant to take over, and the assistant went, no, sorry, I'm going to be loyal to Nigel Pearson. So that's why we've ended up with Hayden Mullins, and that is the scenario with Pearson. Seems a little bit weird. Yeah, it's a weird club in fairness. It's not exactly the most ideal situation. So, like, to kind of put it into perspective, like, but maybe if you look at it from the Pozzo's point of view, this is a brand new season, and if you're taking the post-COVID lockdown as a brand new season, then things haven't gone very well for Watford. But that's only one way of looking at it. The reality is that it is still the same season that we had before, and since then he's done a pretty good job of taking Watford out of the crap and into a place where they probably won't get relegated. They might, but they probably won't get relegated. Or maybe this is like one of the most genius PR moves of all time, where the Watford hierarchy are like, we're definitely going to stay up.
Yeah.
Nobody is able to notice this, and if we manage to sack Nigel Pearson, we will get the credit for saving this club, even if we lose our last 2 games and still somehow manage to stay up. We will still get the credit for doing all of these things. So I don't know, like, it's very hard to get your head around any decision this club makes. You do think that they are kind of losing a little bit of their integrity. Like, if they're going into the transfer market, for example, to try and bring new players to the club, loyalty isn't exactly something that Watford FC can preach about. If you're a youngster coming through, there was kind of like a mercenary feel to the entire club, and Nigel Pearson sacking is the latest in all of this. Like, that being said, it's the second time he's been sacked, strangely, over the last few years. Like, we all thought that the Leicester sacking was a poor decision on their part, and then Ranieri came in and they ended up winning the league. So things didn't turn out poorly on that front either. But it is interesting that Craig Shakespeare did go with him. Maybe it's time to bring in Quique Sanchez Flores and give him a third go at the wheel.
No, but it's a difficult job to sell to somebody, isn't it?
Without question. Who is doing the selling? Is it Pozzo himself, or is a close ally of him who does the selling to a potential candidate? And it's like, we're definitely happy to appoint you, even though you realise that if you do an adequate job, they'll be happy to appoint you and then happy to sack you in a little while. Maybe they just, like, I don't know, potentially like the attention, and they like seeing Watford in the headlines, and this is a surefire way of making that happen. I mean,
look, the only thing the selling point is that you'll get money for your full season, and you might have 7 months of sitting around doing no work and getting paid for it, which probably does appeal to some people. But in terms of a long-term trying to get there, maybe they change their minds and go for one of the firebrand young managers. When you look at Southampton, who didn't sack their manager after the 9-0 defeat and have subsequently been absolutely sensational, I don't know. It's the Premier League is setting up to be relatively interesting compared to how it has been for many years next season, with Arsenal looking pretty decent. As an Arsenal fan, you must be feeling pretty happy about life at the moment.
Well, they've done the 2 best teams in the country without being the better team. Well, they're possibly the better team on Saturday night, but they've done a number on to the 2 best teams in the country in the week that they got beaten by Tottenham last week, where you started to think, well, this is kind of more of the same, where Arsenal will get back to a situation where they're creating lots of chances, but a shrewd manager like Jose Mourinho will always win in the end. The bad guy will always win in the end. And then all of a sudden, they've somehow turned that on its head, where they ambushed Liverpool entirely, and then Saturday night they were actually quite good, where their game plan is starting to make sense. The existence of David Luiz is starting to make a lot of sense. Playing a back 3 for the vast majority of the game, where Luiz looks very, very comfortable. They're playing in a formation that allows Lacazette to come deep and fulfill some sort of Roberto Firmino role, and he is looking exceptional in that role over the last few weeks. He kind of went up against Ilkay Gundogan quite a bit when Arsenal were without the ball on Saturday night, and was brilliant without the ball. And there's a bunch of players who want to play for a club, and all of a sudden you can feel something that isn't numbness when it comes to Arsenal, which is not a bad position to be in. That is always the first step, is for the anaesthetic to wear off, and the anaesthetic has worn off a little bit now, and who knows what might happen next season. The problem is, like, after beating Liverpool Wednesday night, like, Arteta was pretty quick to call out the board and say, no, we don't have the backing, we don't have enough finances, we need to spend big this summer. It's kind of like now or never. If you're the Arsenal board, you've stumbled upon an ascending asset in management terms, a guy who really wanted to be here. It's very, very rare that this will happen again. This is the time to spend big, to put aside all your plans for future spending. Spend now, or forever regret your decision to not do so.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's going to happen. The situation with the stadium in LA not being available because obviously California is not doing great with COVID, as the rest of America isn't. Are there going to be games? So Stan Kroenke's looking at his wealth over here going, and I'm not going to give you any money over here. So what if there's no money, right? What if this has to be patched up and it's purely the guile and cunning of the manager that you're going to be relying on for at least the next 18 months, which is a possibility. In that instance, what happens?
I don't think they qualify for the top 4 in that instance. They might, if the first signs of cracking that we've seen at Manchester United in quite some time are actually more significant than we suspect, then there might be a top 4 space. Top 2 are signed, sealed and delivered. I know I put the question to Kenny earlier on about Chelsea potentially cracking that. That's because I think Chelsea are going to spend big and they're not going to move out of the Champions League places next season. So that's your top 3 covered, in my opinion, for next season. There is one place remaining for the Champions League, and that is the only avenue with which Arsenal can explore where they can make their own money again. Can they finish ahead of Manchester United? And to be honest with you, ahead of Wolves and Leicester City next season, I think they certainly can do the latter. But look at where Manchester United have been going over the last few weeks. Their signs of cracking are small setbacks, but they are not terminal from Manchester United's perspective. If they get, I disagree with Kenny on David De Gea, if they manage to replace the goalkeeper, it can have a Liverpool-esque effect in the way Alisson came in and was transformational in the way they played and the effectiveness of them at the back. That would be Manchester United then for me as their 4th Champions League spot, which leaves Arsenal in 5th. And with Arsenal in 5th, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is leaving the club. And without Aubameyang, Arsenal will not be able to get into the Champions League places. We saw it on Saturday night. He's one of the best strikers in the world, unbelievably clinical, has been hot and cold at times this season, but he's still putting up incredible figures. The Mesut Ozil situation is emblematic of the failings of Arsenal over the past couple of years.
It is, isn't it?
So somebody needs to grab Stan Kroenke and Josh Kroenke and say to them, look at what you've got as manager of the club. The guy who got screwed over in the managerial process a few years ago has actually come back to the club because he loves the club so much. Very rarely will you have a genius who feels such a suspected genius. He's not proven as a genius just yet, but a suspected genius who's got such a connection to a club, who really wanted to come back to the club. Make the most of this opportunity, because you might have money down the line, but you may not have a manager as good as Mikel Arteta, who is so energetic about the cause as well. So find the money. You say there might not be any money. Somebody needs to explain to them the importance of this summer and the importance of next season, because you're only going to have Aubameyang for so long, and you might only have Mikel Arteta for so long.
Yeah, and there is an opportunity at the moment to be a team who is a top 4 team every season, and that brings back the Champions League football that you took for granted under Wenger. So you got to be careful what you wish for. We should talk a little bit more about golf and John Ram being world number 1 and everything else that happened at Memorial at the weekend. Ram is a cold, ice in his veins killer, and I mean it's great that he is a recent Irish Open champion for that tournament, but chances of getting him back to the Irish Open anytime soon might be fairly limited. For sure, he's going to be a major winner very shortly. You think about the last few weeks, how much we've spoken about Bryson DeChambeau. John Ram is probably more likely to be the next new winner over major, you suspect, over the next little while, as good as DeChambeau has looked. Talk of a 2-shot penalty that he should have taken last night, still would have won the tournament, perhaps didn't close it out as emphatically as perhaps it seemed earlier on yesterday evening. But another win in the calendar for him. But I'm not sure, did he watch the Open for the Ages over the course of the weekend, Ger? Was it good? It's been a great few months for Jack Nicklaus. Not only has he managed to fight off coronavirus, he also won the Open for the Ages. So he beat Tiger Woods by 1 shot over the course of the weekend. Only watched a bit of it because it was weird. It just felt strange. It was real archive footage creating a fictional championship, basically, at St Andrews. So it wasn't just random golfers thrown in and, Nicklaus being considered the GOAT automatically won it. It was, how does the GOAT perform on St Andrews specifically? And yeah, he finished 1 shot clear of Tiger Woods. Rory McIlroy, best of the Irish. He finished in a tie for 6th, if anybody didn't see this, with Louis Westhuizen. Louis Westhuizen did pretty well to finish tied 6th with Jordan Spieth in 8th. The rest of the leaderboard was Seve finished 3rd on 14 under. Tom Watson and Nick Faldo were both on 13 under, and then Rory and Westhuizen were behind them on 12 under. I think
we've got live sport back. We didn't need this, but it was interesting all the same to see what the data was going to come up with. But the data is only half trustable here because there was 10,000 responses from members of the one club, and I think this was done on social media as well. So there's a certain element of the science that kind of goes out the window when you essentially put up a poll. But that's it. Good weekend for Jack Nicklaus and John Ram.
A double winner. Obviously, Tom Watson was on the latest episode of Golf Weekly, so wherever you get your podcasts, ideally you're getting your podcasts on the OTB Sports app, but he was very generous with his time, gave plenty of insight into some of the highs and lows of his career as well with the lads. So I know all the golf fans out there probably already know about Golf Weekly, but for those of you who are just coming to the sport, it's a great introduction. You can subscribe to that, Golf Weekly. Enda wants to know, is this the golf version of the fight from Rocky? Didn't they do that in Rocky? Did they have Tyson fight Stallone? Was that what happened? Did Mike Tyson fight Sylvester Stallone? Did they put Ali up against?
There was some weird time warp that involves dodgy enough technology, I think, for sure. That definitely rings a bell. I can't quite remember the exact scenario now, but this was just archive footage. Like it was pretty straight up saying that they didn't try and skew it or actually kind of show it as reality. This was just archive footage on St Andrews, you know. So it is the version of that, as kind of ridiculous as that sounds. But it's curious that the top two were Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods. Although maybe that's just bluffing. Maybe like the person who's like typing up the scoreboard in their socially distant bedroom over the course of the weekend was like, yeah, Nicklaus probably finishes first, Tiger Woods finishes second. That'll abate the fans.
So I'm getting conflicting reports here. In Rocky, they simulated a fight between. They simulated a fight and had the fight in real life, as in real life in the movie. So is whoever the fictional equivalent of Mike Tyson would have been. So it was yeah. That's the whole point of a simulation, isn't it? To like who would win in the simulated fight between Floyd Mayweather and another? Well, it turns out Floyd Mayweather always wins those in real life and in the simulations as well. 8:56 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, you can use the hashtag OTBAM. I want to remind you about what's coming up on Friday afternoon. We have another €1,000 on the line at 1 o'clock in our Know Your Football quiz. You can register at quiz.otbsports.com. quiz.otbsports.com is the website address. Just log in before 1 o'clock on Friday, answer all 15 questions correctly, and the cash will be yours. Know Your Football brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their offers. Visit dunlewy.net for information on responsible gambling. Still to come, we're going to speak with Michael Quinlivan about what it was actually like to play in a match at the weekend. It's also the weekend where everybody was allowed to go back to other sports too, so it wasn't just Club GAA that big matches were being played, but amateur football right around the country was being played as well. So if you have any experience from that you'd like to share in terms of how well or otherwise it went, then we'd love to hear from you, particularly by WhatsApp. 087 9180 180 is the number. OTBAM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. We're going to be back with the pressure rankings in just a moment.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998. If you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this?
When that didn't materialise, I think both Paulie and myself probably looked at each other and kind of thought, what next?
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
You've
For me, it was a self-imposed pressure.
Was I under pressure? No.
Yeah, they're under pressure. Everyone's under pressure.
OTBAM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
And the big pressure.
Yeah, so this is our weekly spot where we rank the pressure that everybody's feeling. Number 3 this week is Pep. I'm not going to tell everybody what it is, but it's okay. Well, we just told everybody because we put it up on the screen there. So it's Pep Guardiola, the GAA, and David De Gea is number 1. He must be feeling a lot of pressure this week. We're going to start with Pep. Why is Pep under pressure, Owen?
If you post a video of you jubilantly celebrating in front of Sky Sports News, announcing your decision to take part in that competition, you automatically put yourself under pressure to win the competition with which you're celebrating your mere existence in. I think at the weekend, Manchester City showed once again why they can be susceptible to these sort of defeats in these sort of competitions. Spoiler, Champions League is this sort of competition where on one night your hopes and dreams can be eroded and shattered. Manchester City, I feel, are far better suited to the 38-game streak of Premier League football. Wasn't the case this year, and in actual fact, as the season wore on, it got to a situation where you started to think about Manchester City and how bloody brilliant they sometimes can be, and how these results have happened to them quite regularly throughout this Premier League year in particular. And you just wonder if when they go behind in games, or when the going gets tough in these games, they don't have another gear to go to actually try and resurrect these results, because they always operate at such a high level. And you look at what's happened over the course of the last couple of weeks in Spain, you look at Real Madrid, and Jerry, you start to think, is this tie with Real Madrid done? Is this progression to the next round a gimme, which we all thought it was
it is absolutely
a month
not done.
ago?
No, it's not. It's not done. It's not done until, especially when you're Man City, it's not done until the bloodied corpse is lying there and the body has convulsed and the last bit of life is out of it. And that's Man City have been spooked by what has happened in the Champions League over the last number of seasons, and Pep Guardiola must be personally spooked by what's happened to him in the Champions League over the last number of seasons, stretching all the way back to his time at Bayern Munich as well. I think you're right that they have to feel like they're under pressure. The main problem seems to be that when Aguero's not on the team, particularly in these big games, they don't have a goal scorer with ice in his veins. Looking at the chances that they created yesterday, they created enough chances to go through, but whatever it is about these big games, they just haven't had somebody who's cool enough to take their time when they need to take their time, or just to get the shot on target. Laporte's shot was a beautiful shot. You're like, wow, that would have nestled in the top corner. It would have looked amazing. There was a Sterling chance, fizzes past the post as well, and you're like, what's going on here? But it happens to them in these big games so much that they must be very concerned about what's going to happen in the Champions League.
Is there a pressure as well with Mikel Arteta here, and the fact that Pep now realises that you leave one of your coaches go, not that you leave him go, you can't keep somebody as an assistant forever. Somebody will always want to go on and manage. That the more these assistants go through a club that Manchester City is managing at, the more information about Pep Guardiola that will be available to everybody. Now, maybe that's complete nonsense, because Manchester City are one of the most watched clubs in world football and everybody knows the game plan anyway. But maybe not. Maybe that adds a little bit more to this thing, where Pep Guardiola is looking over at his old protege and thinking to himself, God, this is a different situation now where I really need to reinvent a few elements of how we play. But it's interesting that you talk about the chances that Manchester City create. It did seem after they go 2-0 down at the weekend, and maybe after they go 1-0 down, that the chances start to dwindle a little bit. I know they had a good few chances in the third quarter of the game, but it didn't really seem that after Arsenal went 2-0 up, that this free-flowing attack of Manchester City would actually be able to arrest the situation. Maybe that was just me, but despite the fact that they had all the possession, you kind of felt that possession wasn't going to turn into significant chances in the way that perhaps Liverpool did during the week. That felt like far more of a freak result than Saturday night did, I think. I think Saturday night you can make a case that Arsenal did really well to actually get the win, whereas in the Liverpool situation it was a bit of a freak on Jurgen Klopp's part. When you have earmarked the Champions League as the be-all and end-all of the club, there is always going to exist a necessity for you to go and win that thing. But after the week that they've had and being thrown out of it and getting back into it and the celebrations from Pep and him telling everybody to apologise for how they've spoken about them, before we've got the reasoned decisions, let me remind you, you've definitely put yourself into crosshairs of a lot of criticism at the very least, but also of a fairly humbling moment where Real Madrid to beat you. But then it's not over. Then it is for the next season of Champions League football and the season after that, the seasons with which they have won the CAS decision over the last couple of weeks to merely be in these competitions. That is when the things continue. And if they lose to Real Madrid and get knocked out of this season's Champions League, imagine how the expectation then ratchets up from the City hierarchy over the following years.
The other thing is, it's not like they were resting players. Like, that's their team. You know, they're not like, it's not like the Man United situation where they can at least go, look, we're trying to qualify for something here. He needs to get those players playing really well. They need to be in form for the big games that are coming. And we just haven't seen them, apart from the game against Liverpool, but sure, Liverpool were tipsy.
Also, Liverpool were quite good that day, and I think the result was a little bit of a freak. The scoreline was a freak. The result wasn't a freak. Manchester City deserved to win that game. The severity with which Liverpool got beaten that day, well, maybe it was down to a little bit of tipsiness, but I actually think there was a bit of a freakiness to do with that result as well. Let's face it, Liverpool were quite good before they went behind in that game. And maybe there's a situation there as well where Manchester City can find that extra gear against somebody like Liverpool. Maybe they'll be fine against Real Madrid because they'll see Zidane on the sideline, they'll see the superstars going up against them, and they'll get to that level. But when they look at lowly Arsenal at the weekend and they're like, why isn't our magic beating these guys? How are we finding ourselves 2-0 down? That's perhaps where they struggle, because it's hard for them to find that other gear when they're so brilliant the vast majority of the time.
Bear in mind, they have not won the Champions League if they beat Real Madrid. There's a possibility they beat Real Madrid and still manage to stutter their way out of the competition, because there are some other good teams on their side of the draw. Let's talk about the GAA. Who's feeling the pressure here? Is it John Horan? Is it Croke Park? Is it where is the pressure point coming at the moment?
Well, the easy answer here is to say that it's the government, but how much realistically is what the GAA is saying going to put added pressure on the government, considering there are a multitude of sectors who are asking questions and asking for a little bit more leeway when it comes to the movement through the phases. So the pressure you probably have to say it lies with the GAA to a point at the moment. So you had John Horan coming out on Friday morning saying that he would call on the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach to act now and to make a special case for the GAA to be able to have 500 people at club grounds. Now, how much is that actually going to rest at the door of Micheál Martin? Is there going to be a special meeting? Is there going to be a special case of lobbying that happens here that allows the pressure to transfer onto them? I'm not sure it will. There will be lobbying within the GAA, though, and John Horan will be asked to make his case again. Tom Ryan will be asked to make a case that the August 10th date is pushed forward from the GAA's perspective. But if that happens, then you are also heaping a load of added extra pressure onto yourself as well, that you have to then add 300 extra people to every match day scenario, but do it safely. If it is said that, all right, GAA, go ahead and have your special case, well, you better be sure that it is done in a safe manner. You better be sure that there isn't going to be a cluster of cases at a match. Like that. This is the sort of high wire act that they negotiate in if they try and get a special case to have 500 people at outdoor events.
So last week we had the chairman of a club in Cork saying, I really don't want it to be the case, but we may well end up having a death as a result of this, should we have any activity. And we have the president and Peter Fitzpatrick, county board chairman of Louth, saying let's have more people at the games. There is a broad church of opinions here, and I think it's natural that there would be a broad church of opinions, given that nobody actually knows what is going to happen over the next few weeks in terms of the R number is up again, the infection rate among the coterie of players and the age group of the players has spiked over the last couple of weeks, the last month, given that people have started to re-engage in activities. And the call for personal responsibility is not necessarily something that we in Ireland have always followed through on. We like to go and have a good time. We like to gather. We like to have house parties. We like to go to the pub. And so I don't know what's going to happen here. I would be hasten slowly would be the advice. Like, if you rush to 500, very hard to go back to 200 after that. What's going to happen is, if you rush to 500 and it's a disaster, no reason that it would be, but if it was, then everything is going to be postponed totally. Whereas actually, an extra couple of weeks of this, is it really that bad?
And if you rush to 500 as well, you automatically you magnetise criticism for something to go wrong. It could be a poor political move as well for them to take that risk, unless they're extremely confident that things are going to be okay. Like, it's interesting that you talk about personal responsibility there, because that was really the theme of Colm O'Rourke's column yesterday in the Sunday Independent, and he seems to have changed his stance a little bit on this, which I actually think is kind of understandable given everything we've seen over the last little while. There has been a mood change from phase 2 plus to where we're at now in the country, where we're seeing clusters of cases once again, where we are seeing a spike in infection rates in young people. I think obviously there's been, the younger generation have got lambasted from many corners for not doing their bit. At the same time, is there a difference between those people who are going to gather in their dozens at a house party and transmitting cases of COVID, and those who actually go out and play club football or hurling? There probably is a bit of a difference there. And maybe actually going back to our initial belief that young people going out into an outdoor situation and playing games is safe, maybe we should be clinging to that a little bit more. But then it's beyond that. It's the supporters. I think that's the idea of playing Gaelic football or hurling is not actually the main issue here. The issue is way beyond that, is the people gathering and actually watching this. Now, do you look at what's actually happening outside of grounds and people standing beside their cars and not social distancing or not wearing masks and saying, well, that's the byproduct if you actually lock them out of the GAA grounds, let them in and at least let the COVID officer space them out inside in the grounds? Well, I don't know. That'll be one of the counter arguments that perhaps John Horan could make.
Yeah, so I think somebody was making the point yesterday, it might have been on the paper, it might have been Paul Rouse, that we could be dealing with this all the way through to 2022. Let's gather information slowly as opposed to rushing to 500 and not learning all the lessons about what it is like to deal with 200 and then ramp it up. Like, we have quite a while ahead of us to deal with this. There's a few interesting points. Michael Verney has the back of the Indo today. Donegal club Naomh Colmkill suspended all club activities on Friday night to prevent the potential spread of COVID-19 after playing Glack, one of the affected Derry clubs, the previous weekend in a challenge game. Donegal officials later commented that they hadn't been advised by the club whether or not they have actual or suspected cases. Drama in Mayo as a football league tie between Lewisburg and Bala was cancelled on Saturday, with Lewisburg admitting that they had acted in an overly cautious way to a confirmed COVID-19 case in the region. I think being overly cautious, not the worst thing at the moment, right? There is a global pandemic on out there.
No, it is, but it is interesting that the personal responsibility has now been taken to that level. It's encouraging for sure that people have taken it this seriously. And like, this is a situation, I think in the Lewisburg Ball situation, it was a case in the locality, wasn't it, rather than a case in the team. Right. So that's the level that Lewisburg have gone to because of the advice they've been given. So, like, I think if you're trying to go for caution there, that is an encouraging enough case, I would have thought. That, you know, like, it's very easy to kind of throw out, well, the GAA just want extra people into the grounds because they want to get all the possible money they possibly can. Whereas this decision in Mayo would show that, no, there will come a time when money is not the be-all and end-all. They realise that they can give up their gate receipts because there might be a chance of having an infection in the community.
All right, what's that number one on our list? It's David De Gea. It had to be David De Gea. Of all the people in the world feeling pressure right now, David De Gea is top of the list in sports terms. I can't see the case for keeping him anymore. I can't make the case. The only case is that you don't want to completely devalue an asset you have, and that you're hoping some mug somewhere is going to pay you some money to take him off your wage bill. But I don't know who that is.
Yeah. Okay, so the value in keeping him obviously is because it might be difficult to actually get back all the money you spent on him. I can't see a reason to keep him in the starting team. I'm with you on that. I think that Dean Henderson needs to be brought back in and given the opportunity. I think he has the potential to be a level above both David De Gea and Sergio Romero. In the short term, Romero probably needs to get his chance. We spoke about this with Kenny earlier on, but what sort of a message does it send to people if you can put in those sort of performances and be kept in the team. I get the idea of trusting your goalkeeper, but this is not new news that David De Gea's forearms have suddenly turned to jelly. They've been jelly-like for quite some time. He has lost something. This is like the goalkeeper's versions of the yips. It's actually kind of tragic to watch, and you feel nervous every time you see a ball hurtling towards David De Gea. It's a terrible destruction of a self-confidence that we're witnessing right now, and I have my doubts if he'll ever be able to get it back, because how many goalkeepers in recent times have had these nightmarish scenarios and managed to pull it back quickly? Of course, there will be exceptions to the rule, but as we said earlier, like Joe Hart is like a very worrying case study if you're David De Gea looking across the city. Like when he was ditched as well, there was no way that confidence was getting fixed. And if David De Gea plays the way he is playing at the moment, no matter what side of the fence you're on in this debate, there is no way he won't be ditched. He will have to be dropped at some point.
So, okay, what do you do? Champions League qualifications on the line. And the difference, we've seen the difference a goalkeeper can make, especially a goalkeeper at the yips. If you're playing against Man United in the next 2 games, you're trying a few pot shots. You're certainly hitting the near post when you're through one-on-one. It's like, oh, I'm going to hit near post. You're not very good at the near post there, David, are you? I kick it straight at you, and good chance you're going to throw it in. If you're Solskjaer, do you make that change now? Or do you think, well, actually, we're going to be okay in these last 2 games. Leicester are in free fall, and this is grand. I'll have my full team back midweek. We'll be fine. And you hope that De Gea plays okay to the point where you can send him on loan to somebody in Spain next season, and he has a good season in Spain, and you try and get some of your money back that way, because actually it is an asset that if you don't get back, you won't be able to use that money to buy somebody you really need to buy.
They would try and get some sort of cash for him. I don't think it'll be as desperate as the Alexis Sanchez case. I don't think it's at those dire straits, but it could get there eventually. What I would say when it comes to the final few games of the season is that word hope that you used. You are hoping for David De Gea to not mess up for the team. Whereas with Sergio Romero, you've kind of got somebody who has done well. There is not really a whole pile of hope with Sergio Romero. You know that there's a very good chance he'll get you a clean sheet. He will save you in a couple of precarious situations. He's not going to be Ederson or Alisson.
You're saying put him in now. You're saying unequivocally, just so we're clear, you're saying change the goalkeeper, take De Gea out now, today. That's it. This, in training, A versus B, De Gea's with the Bs.
I think if we're living in a world where you can sack your manager with 2 games to go, you can change your goalkeeper for 2 games to go, especially when your goalkeeper can't save shots at the near post.
Okay.
Throw in Sergio Romero for the last 2 games. I think his record has been consistent enough. The only issue, of course, is match practice and how sharp he is, which is a fairly important attribute for a goalkeeper. The thing is, if he is going well in training, if he looks as sharp as De Gea in training, and it's a kind of a tight call, you start Sergio Romero because that confidence is invaluable at this point.
Okay. Immediately what happens is that you devalue the asset from De Gea. I don't know what De Gea is suddenly worth. Is he worth nothing? Are you able to get nothing in terms of a transfer fee for David De Gea? Probably not at the moment. You'd probably be able to get something for him. But if he plays well in the last 2 games of the season, then you're like, oh, he recovered. And that's the story that you tell. That's the story his agent tells. And somehow you try and get him out in the summer. That's assuming that they want rid of him and they don't think, like Kenny thinks, that actually he's going to be their goalkeeper next season.
I think it's a big leap from Kenny to think he's going to be their goalkeeper next season, isn't it? I hate to labour this point, but sometimes there are trends in the game that you need to follow, and the 2 best clubs in England have had a fairly similar conversation to this in the recent past, and the trend has been you don't back the keeper who is failing very long. Of course, publicly, you will come out and say, of course, we back the goalkeeper. Privately, you've got to be looking for a replacement. Manchester United are almost in an easier situation than Liverpool and Manchester City, where they have the replacement. They don't need to go out and spend 70 million quid on a goalkeeper. They have a 23-year-old guy who is on the way up, who's had a very, very good couple of seasons, and is 100% deserving of his chance at Manchester United. So all those things considered, To say David De Gea is under pressure is an understatement. You can almost see the end of the road with him at this point. Like his contract goes until 2023, so that's the kind of complication here. It's not just a one-season fix. You can't just get to 2021 with this guy at the end of that season.
And that's why I'm asking you. Like, if you take him out of the team now, there's no chance of you really realising any value for that. So there's the business case and there's the sporting case, and the sporting case is overwhelming. The business case is try and recoup something for this so that your whole team can be better next year. If you get 15 to 20 million for David De Gea now, would you take it?
That is a tough one. 30 million you would. 30 million you take.
I'd take 5, Owen. I would
15,
take 5.
Like, I mean, we're saying here all the reasons why David De Gea is not going to make it again at Manchester United. There could also be a rejuvenation when he leaves the club.
There could be, but I don't care about that. It's like his form at my club is gone. Mm-hmm. His confidence.
And that's why you're selling him. But if you're another club looking to buy him, this is my point, that you might actually be able to say, well, that could be worth 20 million plus offer, up to 30 million potentially, like the Joe Hart situation where he actually continued to get worse after he left. That's probably unlikely, but it is still a huge warning sign to everybody out there who's considering actually signing De Gea. But with De Gea, he might feel more comfortable if he goes back to Spain. Perhaps the pressure of not being at Old Trafford. It was very strange watching it last night because he was in an empty stadium. Even like there wasn't the kind of sense of dread all around the ground. And I wonder if that's almost more awkward for the goalkeeper, where you can actually hear the groans of your teammates rather than the groans of the crowd.
I'm trying to find what Transfer Market says value is. His highest value is 63 million in 2018. They're saying his current value is 36 million. If somebody offered me 36 million for David De Gea, I'd be like, woohoo! Get that fax machine working, baby. Right, so that is number one on the Gillette pressure rankings this week is David De Gea, and it wasn't even close. I'm not going to lie to you. We didn't have the boffins cranking the machines too long for that one after the performance there. So, right, David De Gea is number one on our pressure rankings from Gillette this week. If you want to suggest anything for that, 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Now, Club GAA obviously returned at the weekend. Up until now, the discussion has largely been around whether these clubs can hold on to their players until the return date in September, what's going to happen. On our Saturday panel this weekend, we had 3 county managers, Terry Hyland, Anthony Cunningham and John Maughan, giving their take on the return to play. Here's what the Offaly manager John Maughan had to say about the September 14th return date.
I had asked our chairman, Michael Quinlivan, and you're probably aware he's come out pretty strongly about a number of issues in relation to the lockdown and the return to play at inter-county level. But just in Offaly, the 3 rounds of the championship in Offaly, but you take a player in a certain club that loses the first 2 rounds of the championship. In other words, the third game becomes a dead rubber of a game. And from mid-August, that guy may not be engaging to any huge extent with his club because they're out of the championship, they've a last game, they've no interest in it. And maybe from mid-August to the 14th of September, I had hoped that we might be able to pull those 10 or 12 guys into maybe a session or 2 during the week prior to the 14th of September. And I was hoping that the window might open for that. And I'm still kind of hopeful that there might be some looseness in that department. I know there's a lot of pressure coming on Croke Park in relation to the 200 spectators into games. But I just, from my perspective, I would like to see us being able to engage with them for no other reason. Look, it's a bit of a commute for me from Castlebar up to Offaly, but I'm thinking about the players, just to get them in, whether it's 10 or 12, and just get them back, just to bridge the gap between end of the club championship, maybe mid-August or some, up to the 14th of September.
That's definitely going to be a rolling story. We'll keep an eye on it here on OTBAM for you. But I want to get into what it was actually like to play at the weekend. And I'm delighted to say Michael Quinlivan is with us. Michael, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
How are things, lads?
How was it to feel the weight of a football and actually it means something?
Really good, actually. It was a bit strange maybe when you arrived, I thought. So, there was obviously a lot of stewards there to make sure that everything ran smoothly. We were, one of a number of Tipperary football games that went on over the weekend. And the referee as well, Derek, really kind of kept on top, tried to keep everything in line with the regulations. But, when we went in, they've kept the two teams either side of the pitch. You're leaving down your bags. Like it nearly even feels more weird than a challenge game, because normally you get the use of the dressing rooms in a challenge game. I think the last time maybe you might leave your bag on the side of a pitch would have been an under 10 blitz or something to that effect, I'd say. So that was a bit strange, and kind of just sitting around maybe waiting to go out in the field, because you don't want to arrive too early, because otherwise you're literally just going to be sitting on the side of a pitch for 20 minutes. But once the game started, the pace of it was quicker than any kind of first round championship game I've experienced in Tipperary. It ended up being a cracker with 6 goals, and Care really put it up to us. We got a goal and a point in the last few minutes, and that probably pushed us clear of them. But it was proper battle for the whole game, and was really good to see football being played at club level in the middle of July when the ground is really fast. And some of the quality of the scores that were gotten on both sides was really good, considering, maybe teams might have had a challenge match, maybe 2 if you were lucky, but there's a lot of dual clubs in Tipperary, so you maybe mightn't have got everyone for football for 2 weeks, and to see the quality that was on show was really good, I think.
Wait, so where was the game?
The game was in Arfinnan. It's an enclosed pitch as well, so it was literally just the players and I think we had 5 management who were allowed on the field as well, between management and medics, which is quite good actually. I find sometimes there can be a lot of people on the sideline, and the old GAA thing of encroaching onto the field wasn't really a factor this week. So I'd like to see that maybe retained, because you don't really need that many. We were only allowed to bring maybe 24 players into the inside of the pitch as well, so that was a bit more difficult, because we have a pretty big panel between our club seniors and intermediates to try and pick 24 was tough.
In terms of the actual, so you said you arrived 20 minutes before, is that right?
Yeah, so we obviously weren't allowed into the dressing room, so we kind of probably arrived a bit later than we normally would for a championship match. I'd say we maybe arrived about 40 minutes before it, which in normal circumstances people would be nearly checking the watch to see where you are, and there'd be phone calls going out. But straight out into the field, just sitting down, putting on your boots, and we probably had a longer warm up than we intended because we were nearly there so long. It was very, very hot actually, and Care got there a bit earlier, so they got the shaded side. So I think they didn't want us just sitting out in the sun for too long. So we kind of had more of a prolonged warm up with a couple more drinks breaks put in. The drinks breaks themselves during the game actually, they were probably they have to be done, I think, because the days of maybe sharing water bottles for the next while is gone. So it's very difficult to be having Mayor Ishkas going around and trying to carry 15 different water bottles for 15 different people. I don't think that's feasible, but they were snappy only a minute, but it does kind of maybe change the way the game is done, because you're kind of planning for your first 15 minutes. You get a chance to have a quick chat and a regroup after 15 while you're having a quick sup of water, and it becomes definitely more a game of 4 quarters. Can be obviously two-sided there, where if you have a bit of momentum and you get a couple of scores before it and then there's a break in play, it can be quite hard to pick it back up again. But Derek, as I said, Derek O'Mahony, who refereed the game, it wasn't a 5-minute stoppage at all. So it was very, very well done, and I must say that the whole thing ran very, very smoothly as well.
Was there a quick chance to make a few switches, a few tactical words during those drink breaks?
Yeah, very quickly. Like you probably had maybe 30 seconds. I think it's more so you may not probably make much tactical switches from management, but certainly the opportunity for players to even talk to each other just very quickly to have a chat and see what's working, what's not, what you should be maybe trying to change for the next 15 certainly helps, I think. And look, it's not I didn't find it. I know some people don't like it in the Premier League. I didn't find it as a player to be a major bugbear now at all. If anything, it was fine. It was only a very short stoppage anyway.
How has the training been over the last few weeks, Michael, and how match fit did you feel yesterday?
I suppose a lot of people came back to their clubs very fit, mainly off the back of probably most football clubs around the country were running different fundraisers and stuff for 5Ks. And most players, to be honest, if they were training away, kind of wanted to keep on top of it. It was nearly the only thing they could nearly focus on throughout the lockdown, when it was probably a bit more of a hard lockdown from the end of March to probably the start of May, I suppose. So I think a lot of people came back to the training pitch very, very fit. And I think we went back at the end of June. So we've had maybe 3.5 weeks together. And the sharpness was from my own perspective, I don't know, I think I found it very, very workable. I didn't feel like I was rusty. And it probably shines a light on the fact that you maybe don't need 12 weeks to prepare collectively for a match. I think 3 or 4 weeks together as a group, and 5 or 6 on your own or doing your own program is plenty for you to be right for championship.
And that's the thing. It's been mentioned so much that the inter-county managers will need a huge period of time with the players before the inter-county championship kicks off. But what you're doing at the moment, it sounds like that there is a happy medium here, where if you have a month with the county after the conclusion of the club championship, that might actually be okay.
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, it's look, I heard what John Maw had said there, and I do take his point on board. There will be a certain amount of club players who fall through the cracks of when their club season finishes and when the county season starts. And I wouldn't have any problem with those people, even if it's just a couple of nights of physical work where they're just keeping on top of themselves before the main group comes back together. I think that's fine. I wouldn't probably advocate for lads travelling hell of a long distance for that. I think you probably should be doing that in your locality anyway. But on the football side of it, yeah, we were lucky enough. We probably had a challenge game, one challenge game, that was it. But we were able to do plenty in training. We've had huge numbers down because most people are at home, and it's been great. It's probably the most enjoyable club season that I can remember anyway. I've really enjoyed going down training. The difference between travelling 5 minutes down the road in Clonmel and coming down from Dublin is probably a factor in that, all right. But yeah, I don't think... I think from the football side of it, it's probably a purer form. I looked around at most of the scores around the Tipperary Championship, which, I know the time of year is probably a small bit of a factor in it as well, but definitely the scoring was quite high, much higher than it would be if we were playing championship in April and October. I think you might find that at inter-county level as well, that the chance that you can implement huge systems to try and stop teams it mightn't be as feasible to do that in a shorter space of time, and you might find it's a purer form of the game.
I hope you're right, but the weather in October, November might not be as good as it was at the weekend. But it's really interesting because there was a sense that club players are going to experience a defined season when they know exactly when their games are going to be and when it's going to finish and when the end point of that is, and they're going to play games in decent weather, and they're going to say, right, this is the sport that I want to play, and I'm not willing to go back to maybe having the week of Christmas, or training for 47 weeks for a blitz run off in 2.5 weeks. What's the atmosphere like amongst your teammates? Is there a sense of this better not go back now to the way it has been in the past?
It probably hasn't been talked about a whole pile. I do feel like we've a lot of players in our club who are just play Gaelic football. I do feel a bit sorry for the guys who are dual players around the country who are being asked to go out week on week. And if you were a successful dual club, and we have a few of them in Tipperary, between like JK Brackensworth in the Seamus O'Ryan final and the county senior football final last year. Lockmore have won the double back in 2013 or 14. Like, those guys are being asked to go out week on week for 11 weeks straight, which is tough. But from the championship perspective for us, it's great that, you know, you're like, the way the championship is in Tipperary, only the top team from the group goes through. It's pretty much straight knockout because you can't afford to lose a game. And everyone knows, right, I need to be ready for 2 weeks' time. We got the programme of games pretty much from the start. We have a list. Everyone knows when you need to be there. And it's brilliant from that perspective. I would never have been a fan of the April club month. I always thought it was trying to force the issue, when the much easier thing would have been to just bring the inter-county season forward and give the clubs their players exclusively when either they finish up with the county when the team is knocked out, and you know full well that the club season is probably going to start in the first week in August, and it's going to run for maybe 2-3 months, and it probably is going to finish in the calendar year with an All-Ireland final at the end. But that's only going to be a handful of teams that are going for that long. I think clubs would be much happier with that if they knew that they had maybe club leagues and other cup competitions that, you know, didn't require your county players to play, and that they maybe start in April and May, and they run until the middle to the end of June, and you know then you probably have 4 weeks and then championship is starting. I think that's a much better way to do it. I think it gives everyone a structure on knowing where people stand when the county players are going to be with the county and when they're going to be back with the club, because, you know, it'd be much easier for both sets of people to know that.
In terms of the inter-county season, we've just talking to people around the country, there's less certainty that we're actually going to have an inter-county season at this point than there was, I would say, 4 weeks ago. There's just a kind of general sense, well, the figures aren't going great. Who knows what winter's actually going to be like for the phase 2 or the return of the virus, and also just the sense that if anything goes wrong, then it's going to be very hard for them to rescue the situation. What's your own sense about that at the moment?
Yeah, in the last couple of weeks, there's probably been, I think everyone was excited when, number one, the club season was coming back, and then the inter-county season had been decided, and everyone probably had the hard date in their head that at least we're going to get to play something this year. But I think in the last couple of weeks, there's probably been, you know, things haven't gone as well as we would have hoped as we've started to reopen the country, and it's difficult to see if we have a second wave how the inter-county season might go ahead. But look, we live in hope. I think everyone would love to see Gaelic football being played on that stage with bigger crowds. But I mean, it's anybody's guess whether or not we're able to maintain the current level. I think at the current level, it's certainly feasible. But if there's a further spike and cases numbers go back into the hundreds, the GAA are just going to have to take the public health advice. Much like most of the businesses around the country have done the same over the last while, and just, you know, take it as it is. Everyone's living in the same boat at the minute.
And one last question, in terms of the structure of the championship and there being no back door, does that have any bearing on your excitement levels for playing inter-county football?
I don't think it changes much. I understand the thing of wanting maybe a second day out, but look, it's a unique year, and the fact it's straight knockout, it's a throwback to a time before I started playing. I think there'll be some brilliant upsets in the first round of championship, and I think everyone will be looking forward to it by the time it comes. It might be difficult to go out on a second day, maybe in the middle of November, and in the time frame that the GAA were given, I think everyone's happy enough that they just run off the competition, rather than try to accommodate the competition in its current form. I think it'll be a brilliant spectacle. The fact there's no back door could throw up some mad results, I think, because there's no holding back.
Yeah, I suppose we'll be grateful for any of those games at that point. Michael, great stuff, and great to see you back in the field as well. Thanks so many for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Michael Quinlivan there giving some thoughts about playing at the weekend. It is 9:39 here on OTB AM. A reminder, of course, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Right, it is time to address some fairly serious, erroneous journalism that was carried out primarily by you, Owen Sheehan, on this show last Friday. On Friday, Team OTB took part in a duathlon in association with BMW and Triathlon Ireland. The leaderboard was revealed here on Friday, but there's been some changes since then. Here's some of the highlights from the race. We'll deal with that afterwards.
Jesus, I feel like I have something on today. Oh, I have to do that run. Sorry. I was just so relaxed about it, you know.
All right, Nathan Murphy here, Phoenix Park, hurricane blowing, ready for the run and ride for Pieta in association with BMW Ireland. I wouldn't say I'm excited, a little bit nervous. The wind is going to add at least half an hour to my time.
It's a funny one doing it remote. I'd be more used to team sports and having a couple of teammates there to back me up, especially when it comes to the runs.
So we have the gear, we have the training, we have the facilities, we also have the wind, and we have like a natural competitive instinct to see what's going to happen today. So next time you see us, we might all be dead.
Hey lads, warm up done. I think I have to get in the bike now, is it? Forest Gump has served me well. Tough enough at times. Bit of a wind, bit of a few drizzles of rain here as well in the morning, but feeling strong. You know, I hope someone can catch me, make a competition out of this, but I'm feeling great.
That straight up there is a killer. Apart from that, it was grand. Thought it was 4 laps, ended up doing 5, got lost in the first lap. So I'm not very happy with that, but we'll finish it out anyway.
Are you feeling good for the 2.5k run now?
Should be able to finish it out strong enough, yeah. Hopefully. I'll get going.
I'm pretty happy just to get through it, to be perfectly honest. Windy day. And
Brilliant. Is that your first duathlon?
Yeah. No, it's the first time doing it, and it was good.
All in all, yeah, it was a tough final 2.5 kilometres. I'm just waiting for Adrian Barry. Here he comes, the hero on one leg. Up he comes. Oh, what bravery.
Oh, I'm delighted to finish. That was really all I wanted to do. I'm absolutely banjaxed. Oh, I've pains in places I didn't know I have.
Nathan Murphy and Shane Hannon are with us. Shane, take your victory lap.
I'm going to enjoy this. Yeah, this is going to be enjoyable. I'm going to sip on my orange juice and act a little bit smug here because it was nice to predict the win and then do it. You know, it makes it all the sweeter. I think when you actually tell people you're going to win and then you follow it through.
We've got images.
Act a little bit smug. Dear God, come on. This Shane Hannon, who's moved back home to Monaghan, is a different beast to the guy we've spent the last few years working with in Dublin. You know, nice, modest individual. Dear God, being smug comes very naturally to you, Shane.
I think it was because Owen said something on OTBAM last week that kind of resonated with me. He said something like that there wasn't enough smack talk, that this was all very nice and friendly and relaxed, and we were all just encouraging each other, but there was no competitive element to it. And I figured, you know, why not be the guy, because I was going to win, why not be the guy to rile everyone up?
Do you think the Neil Armstrong is going to have a poster of you winning the triathlon behind him in his room now?
Well, Neil Armstrong's dead, so I don't think he will have one, but Buzz Aldrin might. Buzz Aldrin.
Sorry, got them mixed up.
But maybe they will be. Maybe I will be their hero, but who knows? I'll have to put a poster of Roger Bannister up now as well, since I'm an athletics icon.
Come on, Owen. The second screw up in this whole triathlon thing. I just want to clear something up. We've got the leaderboard here. I think we can reveal this in stages. So we've got the top three. There was a lot of jiggery-pokery going on here. Team OTB official results. Number 1, Shane Hannon, 77.73. 0.73. Well,
that's a strange.
What's that mean?
I don't know. What's a 73 thing? Who did this?
Must be 78.13 then.
Ah, lads. Did somebody add up this? They did.
I still won regardless. So
is that 0.73?
Well, that just removes... That would remove that would remove any faith that people have in this. It's like...
Well, I think anything that removes faith in the results, we can all get behind.
So it's 78 something. And then it's Tommy is second. And Enda is third on 81. I presume they've just added minutes and not gone to the hundreds. Oh, God. This is a bit of a shambles. Anyway, number 1 was Shane Hannon. Clearly wins 78.13, I'm assuming. And then 79.20. Is that right? Is Tommy 79.20? 7, 6, and 5, 11. That's not right either.
Wow, this is embarrassing. Wow. The whole thing is a sham.
Well, look, I just want to point out that...
All results just thrown out.
The next one, please. 4 to 6. The order of this is not in doubt, because we actually did it on the same place. Tom Malone, 84 minutes. Me, 5th on 86 minutes. And you, 91, 5 minutes behind me, Nathan. 5 minutes of eating my dust. And yet, Owen brought to air on Friday that somehow you had beaten both me and Tom. And I'm suspecting that you bribed him to say, irrespective of the results, I want you to say, I'm first. Or else, Owen, you just went on a crappy solo run and stole our moment of victory. What happened?
It was an 8-pack of Bavaria. That's all that was required for me to give Nathan Murphy the win on Friday morning. So you're very welcome. But as you can see there, you needed to perhaps... get a little bit closer for the light to actually come through. So congratulations, first of all.
Whoa, back up for 1 second here now. Because the confusion arose from the fact that we didn't all do the same course, even though we were at the same place. So myself, Enda and Tom ran considerably further, over 10% further than yourself and Adrian did, because ye took a shortcut for the entire 5K.
No.
So the result, it was very clear, the instructions from Triathlon Ireland. Run around the football pitches on the path. So as myself, Enda and Tom did, we ran around on the path. So we did about 5.5 kilometres for the first run, whereas yourself and Adrian went on the pitches in around the goals and just did exactly 5K, which would explain, when you look at those times, Ger, why I finished the run, despite doing 500 metres more, over 2 minutes ahead of you and Adrian, yet you and Adrian were on your bikes before me because you were right up behind me, despite me running 500 metres more, despite finishing over 2 minutes in front of you, because I had to stand and wait for Owen, who I'm thinking you must have paid to delay me, waiting to do my interview. And explain this to me. If I only finished 5 minutes behind, right, and we both ran the final 2.5K in the same time because I knew I wasn't going to catch you, how come you were finishing your 2.5K as I was starting it? Because again, I had to wait for 5 minutes to be interviewed live on air by Owen Sheehan, who kept delaying, which lends me to believe you're the one who paid him off to make sure it wasn't a proper and fair competition.
I crushed you, is what I'm hearing here. All your litany of excuses about Am
I right? No. Did we or did we not run over 500 metres more than you in the initial 5K?
Well, I don't know. Did you? If you did, what the hell were you doing? You're supposed to run 5K.
We were following the rules of the duathlon.
The rule of the duathlon is you run 5K. We stopped ours when we hit the 5K because that's the instruction. We actually didn't run a shorter course from you, and ultimately Gary Crossan from Triathlon Ireland was the same way. Did you or did you not run on the grass
behind the goals the entire way around?
Behind the goals? What are you talking about?
Exactly.
The path. Adrian ran on the path, and I ran beside him.
Oh.
Can I just say, lads?
You're a great loser. This is good to see. I'm glad you're taking it well, Nathan. Do you want to do it again? Do we go and do it again?
Gladly.
this Friday morning, happily.
There's no wind. If there's no wind.
This is quite pathetic, lads, I have to say. I mean, this is the equivalent of the Williams drivers arguing and bickering over who finished 19th and who finished 20th as me and my Mercedes coast home to another victory. I mean, this is... You're arguing over losing places here. Who cares? I won.
Oh, no, you won your category. I won my category, Shane.
What's that category?
The old man category. Like,
the old man, okay.
We're like the over 40s that Nathan had to try and grandfather himself in to give himself a chance of winning.
There were some suspicions of cheating on your end, Shane. We did spot a taxi in the background of one of your Sky pits on Friday morning.
The funny thing is, I mean, obviously my troubles with the gears on my bike were well publicised, but what I didn't realise was my dad had actually woke up early as well. So Dad was the owner of that taxi that appeared in the background of one of the videos. At one point during my cycle, unbeknownst to me, he pulls up alongside me and he's literally driving alongside me, shouting encouragement. This was how serious this was taken on the back roads of Monaghan. This was the country roads on the North Monaghan-South Armagh border. Beautiful country air. And then all of a sudden, Dad pulls up beside me. It was like something out of the Tour de France. I mean, all we're missing.
What are the rules on that? Because I know Ger and Owen have both been to the Tour de France. Is the team car allowed to pull up alongside? And
no, absolutely not.
And break the wind.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
You were drafting on the back of your dad's car. That's what I'm hearing here.
Not quite. You see the hills. That's the other thing as well. I've been looking at the inclines on Strava. Now, to be fair to you lads in Phoenix Park, I think your elevation gain was something like 180 metres. Mine was something like maybe 130. Tommy Rooney's was 60 metres. Let's just be clear here. Tommy Rooney picked a flat course in Clare. So probably puts his second place finish. You know, it makes it look a little worse. I mean,
he's obviously not here to defend himself, so we can happily pile on. I think we can all agree that the big loser was Tommy, who we assumed was the fittest man on Team OTB, who's been banging on about his the time on his watch for the last 2 years. Talked about stride length and his new smart runners, which were buzzing him any time that he was supposed to be doing stuff, and it didn't. It all came to nothing. He finished second. Endo has been in touch to say this wasn't taken into the time, by the way. It was all done per kilometre basis from Strava. So irrespective of whether or not you ran an extra 500 or whatever.
Well, I think running the extra 500 tired us out slightly, and the hanging around to be interviewed by Owen Sheehan, it all adds up.
It all adds up to give you a rest in between.
Sorry, you're now going with Enda on the side of timings, considering what we've just gone through, where his timings were nonsensical, didn't make any.
Well,
didn't add up in any way.
The 60 seconds thing, it's.
Here, what I want to know is what's next for Shane Hannon, because the people in Triathlon Ireland were incredibly impressed by some of the times you were producing and were suggesting that you need to up it.
Look, I've said before, my PB was, I think, 18:54 maybe, and I think I'm capable of low 17 if they get a hold of me, give me some proper training. I was under pressure. You can't forget. I ran a 9 minutes 59 second 2.5k at the very end after hopping off the bike. That's pretty impressive timing. Now, I had my mum shouting encouragement, and she, as we said, is a tiger mum. If I'd come second, I wouldn't have had dinner. I would have been told to go to bed early, basically, on Friday night. So I had to win. And when you add the pressure and think about the fact that I had actually told the country that I was going to win on social media the day before, and then carried it out impressively, considering I had a 2-minute gap when my bike wouldn't work, that's some serious going. And if Triathlon Ireland want me to continue on with this as a career, come and get me.
We can put up Adrian Barry's time now here. He's the biggest loser. He gets his own slot. He didn't get into the top 6. 102 minutes. He completed it. Fair play to him for completing it. 29 minutes 5k, 56 minutes for the cycle, an hour-long cycle for 20k, and then 16.47 minutes for the final 2.5. He's obviously not here to defend himself either. Claims that he got a hamstring injury pretty much at the start of the run, although we did the first 5k together, so I don't know what happened.
And did he mention it?
He did mention it. He said it's a bit of a tight hammer.
Convenient.
If you're going to play the long game, you have to get in with your story fairly early on. So,
how many of Shane's family were involved in this? Right, you say your bike wasn't working. Your brother's probably a mechanic or something and was there ready to switch wheels.
Yeah, no, my dad actually said at one point we should have had a second bike there just in case that happened, and he wasn't even joking. He was actually being serious. That's how seriously my family was taking it. Dad got out of bed to hop in the car and kind of follow me on the bike.
But it worked.
He was only there for a short period, and I of course didn't follow him the entire time. I was cycling on my own merits, but it was a serious thing up in Monaghan here. People were beeping as they were going past, supporting me. They knew what this was all about. They knew not to stop me to talk. And I did run past a couple of people that I actually knew, and there was no talking to them. You just kept going. And that's the problem with running remotely as well. I didn't know how well you guys were doing, so I assumed how you were doing, but I couldn't see you with my own eyes. So that made me probably push myself a little bit further, I think.
Nathan, all joking aside, you got crushed by an old man. What happened?
Well, I knew you'd kill all of us on the bike with that motor that you got running there. Like, as was proven, I think everyone else did the bike in pretty much a similar time, sort of 47, 48, 49 minutes. Yet somehow, Jerry, you managed to do it in 42 minutes. But I didn't get crushed. I was, as I say, comfortably clear in terms of the run. So let's wait till we're back in the water and the run. The true triathlon, which we'll have to test ourselves on next time.
You're throwing down a gauntlet, are you?
Next summer, baby.
No, this year. This is not too late.
Well, we'll have to wait and see if there's going to be full-scale triathlons.
We could organise one ourselves. You name the time, you name the date, you name the place. I'll be there, and you'll be eating my dust again. That's all I can say. Shane has unlocked the competitive instinct in all of us here, and it's the right thing to do. Our Zooms our Skypes, the lads seem to have disappeared there for just at the right moment. Owen, I can't believe you didn't do it.
I can.
I can't believe that you've managed to get away with. We're at 9:55 here, and I forgot to bring up from the start that somehow you decided against running and riding for Pieta.
I'm surprised that Shane Hannon hasn't managed to mention the population of Monaghan this morning. How Monaghan managed to produce such amazing runners and riders, given their lowly population. That is the only thing we've been missing this morning from a County Monaghan victory lap.
It was, in all seriousness though, a little bit of distraction for us over the last 6 weeks we've been doing it, and it's actually a really good thing to do, and you feel fairly good after it. I mean, certainly there's pain, as Adrian said, in parts you didn't know existed, but the overall sense of well-being and achievement that you get from doing something that you just didn't think you were going to be able to do at any point, and then to actually do it is amazing. So I would wholeheartedly recommend that people, the programs are available, really easy to follow in terms of the running and riding, and I think the two lads are back to sign off. All in all though, Nathan, as I was saying there, the type of thing that you don't think you're actually going to be able to do when someone says you're going to have to run, cycle, and then run again, and then you can't do it the first time you try it, but over a period of time, and then eventually on the day, you suddenly find the ability to do it.
Yeah, well, obviously from a year ago, we all did just the one segment of the triathlon, whereas this time round, we managed to do 3 different segments. So there's obviously progress there. And yeah, it was tough, really tough on Friday morning with the wind, but it was enjoyable to get off the bike and do that final 2.5K. There is a good sense of achievement and accomplishment, despite the obvious disappointment with maybe the timings and the end result. But there was, Jer, you might have noticed when we were running around, and the grimace on our face when we're 2 kilometres into our 5K run, we were met by a couple of lads from the army who were jogging around the Phoenix Park as well, and had what looked like quite hefty bags on their back.
Yeah.
We're obviously out working hard, and we kept meeting them. Every time I was doing the cycle, they were still there running around for a good hour. And I got an email then, about 2 hours later, from Richard Byrne, who was one of the lads running around giving us encouragement, said, we were all suffering together. He said, it'd be great to put the team through their paces, army style. Plenty of options. We could run a boot camp in the Curragh or survival training down in Wicklow. You mightn't be as dry or as clean as you were this morning, but it could be a good opportunity to get you competing under pressure. So I think, Ger, for all these lads with an awful lot to say for themselves, such as Shane Hannon, Enda Call, Tommy Rooney,
Owen.
Maybe a weekend down at Owen, obviously.
Especially Owen.
A weekend down at the Curragh might be just the trick for them.
Oh, I've done plenty of weekends down at the Curragh. I have lost a lot of money down there and have had brilliant sessions. Be up for doing that again.
This will be a different type of experience for you, Owen. So we're going to follow up with Richard Owen and we're going to sign you up. I don't think the insurance will cover us all, lads, so we'll leave it to you.
Exactly. The heart attack risk is too high for us. But you, Owen, you're a young man. Happy birthday, Owen, by the way. He's, what age are you now?
I don't like to reveal my age.
He's 26, so he's late 20s officially.
Wow.
He's out of the early 20s.
He must be embarrassed. You must have been embarrassed on Friday. You're chatting to Jason Quigley, and Jason Quigley is looking at you with pity. Never mind about the ginger thing. Looking at you going, all these other guys are out there taking this on, raising awareness for charity, putting their bodies on the line, and you're sitting in the studio, sitting there doing absolutely nothing, wasting your life.
It felt so good. It really did. It was just so damn pleasurable. Like, I mean, just that warm, cozy studio. Jerry, you're there this morning. It's a pretty nice place to be.
Not as nice as the Phoenix Park on Friday morning, even with the wind. There was just a moment where you get to the end and you're like, oh, I just did this. Out of nowhere, we just did this. You can follow all of that on the website, otbsports.com, and we actually managed to complete it. I can't believe it. Congratulations, Shane. You said you would do it. You did it. Nathan, I can't believe that like you were five minutes behind me in the whole thing. That is unbelievably bad effort from you. I thought that it was at least going to be neck and neck, that there'd be a sprint finish at the end, but no.
Well, we've already gone through the circumstances, but well done, Gerard. Well done.
That's our lot today. It's bang on 10 o'clock. Remember, you can listen back to the show on podcast. You can find us on the OTB Podcast Network and the brand new OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store or on Google Play. Off the ball, we'll be back on FM from 7 o'clock this evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Best of luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Football is back.
Aguero makes it 3. Chelsea switch off at the back.
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest